A chilling fog blankets Ravenswood Manor, where whispers of a cursed bride haunt its crumbling walls. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson plunge into a web of terror-white lace veils, hidden tunnels, and cryptic notes, some raveling a feud between the Carvers and the vengeful Rosiers. As knives gleam and shadows strike, a stolen dowry and a murdered bride's vow threaten to bury the truth forever. Can Holmes unmask the phantom bride before the manor burns? Chapter 1. The Haunting Letter. The fog clung to Baker Street like a heavy coat, wrapping the cobblestones in a damp, gray haze. Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire in his armchair, his long fingers tapping the armrest. The room smelled of old books, pipe smoke, and Mrs. Hudson's tea, which sat cold on the table. Dr. John Watson, his friend and partner, scribbled notes in a leather journal, the scratch of his pen the only sound breaking the quiet. Holmes's sharp eyes flicked to the window. "Dull day, Watson," he said, his voice low but restless. "London's too quiet. My mind craves a puzzle." He leaned back, his thin frame sinking into the chair, but his gaze stayed sharp, like a hawk waiting for prey. Watson looked up, his mustache twitching. "You've solved 3 cases this month, Holmes. Give your brain a rest." "Rest is rust," Holmes snapped, his fingers still tapping. "A mind without work is a blade gone dull." Before Watson could reply, a sharp knock echoed from the door. Mrs. Hudson's voice called up the stairs. "Mr. Holmes, a visitor." Her tone held a mix of worry and annoyance, as if she sensed trouble. Holmes's eyes lit up. "At last," he murmured, springing to his feet. "Show them in, Mrs. Hudson." The door creaked open, and a young woman stepped into the room. She was pale, her dark hair pinned tightly under a simple bonnet. Her gray dress was neat but worn, and her hands clutched a small, crumpled envelope. Her eyes, wide and nervous, darted between Holmes and Watson. "Mr. Holmes," she asked, her voice shaky but clear. "I'm Emily Carver. I need your help. Something terrible is happening." Holmes gestured to a chair. "Sit, Miss Carver. Tell me everything. Leave out no detail, no matter how small." Watson set his journal aside, his doctor's instincts kicking in. The girl looked scared, her hands trembling as she smoothed the envelope. "Would you like tea?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No, thank you. I don't have much time." She glanced at the window, as if expecting someone or something to appear in the fog. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes locked on her. "The envelope," he said. "It's the key to your visit, isn't it? Show it to me." Emily hesitated, then handed it over. The envelope was old, its edges yellowed, sealed with red wax that bore a strange symbol, a rose crossed with a dagger. Holmes turned it over, his fingers tracing the seal. "Curious," he muttered. "Very curious." "It came this morning," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No sender, no address, just my name on the front. I found it on my doorstep." Holmes opened the envelope with care, pulling out a single sheet of paper. The writing was elegant but uneven, as if written in a hurry. He read aloud, "Beware the phantom bride's curse. By the next full moon, you will join her in eternal sorrow. Flee Ravenswood Manor, or your fate is sealed." Watson frowned. A threat, or a prank? Holmes's lips twitched into a half-smile. "Not a prank, Watson. The paper is expensive, the ink rare. This was written by someone with means and intent." He turned to Emily. "Ravenswood Manor. You know it." Emily nodded, her face growing paler. "It's my family's home, in the countryside near Dartmoor. I live there with my brother, Thomas, and our housekeeper, Mrs. Gale. The manor's old, full of stories. People in the village, they talk about a curse." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Tell me about this curse." Emily swallowed hard. "They say a bride died at Ravenswood 100 years ago on her wedding night. Her name was Clara. She was betrayed, murdered, and her spirit never left. They call her the Phantom Bride. Every few years, someone in the village or my family dies strangely, always near the full moon. The villagers say it's her curse." Watson leaned back, skeptical. "Ghost stories, Holmes. Surely you don't believe. I believe in facts. Holmes cut in, his tone sharp. And the fact is, Miss Carver is terrified. Something real is behind this. He held up the letter. This was written to scare you, Miss Carver. Why? What makes you a target? Emily's hands twisted in her lap. I don't know. I'm nobody special. I manage the manor's accounts, help Thomas with the estate. We keep to ourselves. But strange things have happened lately. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Go on. Last week, I heard footsteps in the halls at night. Heavy ones, like a man's boots, but no one was there. And yesterday, I found a white lace veil on my bed. I don't own anything like that. Watson shivered, despite himself. A veil, like a bride's. Emily nodded. I burned it. But this morning, the letter came. I'm scared, Mr. Holmes. I don't know what's happening, but I feel watched. Holmes paced the room, his mind racing. Footsteps, a veil, a letter with no sender. Someone is weaving a careful web. But why target you? What's changed at Ravenswood? Emily hesitated. Thomas has been acting strange. He's secretive, always locking himself in the study. And there's a new visitor. A man named Mr. Blackwood. He says he's a historian, studying the manor's past. He's been asking odd questions about our family. Holmes stopped pacing. Blackwood, describe him. Tall, thin, with dark hair and a scar on his cheek. He's polite, but cold. His eyes are always watching, like he's searching for something. Holmes nodded, storing the detail. And your brother? What's he hiding? I don't know, Emily admitted. He won't talk to me. But he's been selling off land, meeting with strangers at odd hours. It's not like him. Watson scribbled notes, his brow furrowed. Sounds like trouble brewing at Ravenswood. Holmes turned to Emily. Miss Carver, I'll take your case. Watson and I will come to Ravenswood tomorrow. Pack lightly and don't tell anyone we're coming, not even your brother. Trust no one until we know more. Emily's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I don't know what I'd do without you. Holmes waved her off. Save your thanks until the puzzle's solved. Now, go home and act as if nothing's wrong. We'll arrive by noon. After Emily left, Watson turned to Holmes. You think this is more than a ghost story? Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling around his sharp features. Ghosts don't write letters, Watson. Someone wants Emily Carver scared or dead. The question is why. The next morning, Holmes and Watson boarded a train to Dartmoor. The countryside rolled by, green hills swallowed by fog. Holmes sat silently, his mind turning over the facts like pieces of a chessboard. Watson, used to his friends' quiet moods, read the morning paper, but his thoughts kept drifting to the phantom bride. Ravenswood Manor loomed on the horizon as their carriage rattled down a muddy road. The house was old, its stone walls covered in ivy, its towers jagged against the gray sky. The air felt heavy, as if the manor itself held secrets. Mrs. Gale, the housekeeper, greeted them at the door. She was a stout woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense frown. Miss Emily said you'd come, she said, eyeing them warily. Rooms are ready. But I'll warn you, this house has a way of unsettling folks. Holmes smiled thinly. We're not easily unsettled, Mrs. Gale. Inside, the manor was a maze of dark wood and creaking floors. Portraits of stern-faced carvers lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Watson as he carried their bags. Emily met them in the parlor, her face still pale but less frantic. Thank you for coming, she said. Thomas is in the village, and Mr. Blackwood's out walking the grounds. It's just us for now. Holmes scanned the room, noting the dusty chandelier, the faded rugs, the faint smell of damp stone. Show me where you found the veil, he said. Emily led them upstairs to her bedroom, a small space with a four-poster bed and a single window. Holmes examined the floor, the bed frame, the window latch. No signs of forced entry, he muttered. The veil was placed here deliberately. Watson frowned. By whom? The housekeeper, a servant, or someone who knows the house well? Holmes said. He knelt by the bed, running his fingers along the floorboards. Dust disturbed here. Someone stood by the bed for some time. Emily shivered. You mean, they watched me sleep? Holmes didn't answer, his attention on a faint scratch near the baseboard. He pressed it, and a soft click echoed. A small panel in the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage. Watson gasped, "A secret passage." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Every old manor has its secrets, Watson. This one's no exception." They followed the passage, Holmes leading with a lantern. It twisted through the walls, cold and damp, ending at a small door that opened into the library. Bookshelves towered over them, filled with dusty tomes. Holmes scanned the room, his gaze landing on a desk cluttered with papers. "Thomas's study?" he asked Dot. Emily nodded. "He spends hours here." Holmes rifled through the papers, his hands quick but careful. He paused at a letter, its handwriting matching the one Emily had received. It was addressed to Thomas, unsigned, but it mentioned the curse and payment due. "Interesting," Holmes said, pocketing the letter. "Your brother's keeping secrets, Miss Carver." Before Emily could respond, a loud crash came from downstairs. They rushed to the parlor, where Mrs. Gale stood over a shattered vase, her face pale. "I didn't touch it," she stammered. "It just fell." Holmes examined the shards, his brow furrowed. "Fell or was pushed." He glanced at the ceiling, where a faint creak sounded. "Someone's in the house." Watson, who reached for his revolver, but Holmes held up a hand. "Not yet, Watson. Let's see who or what we're dealing with." They moved quietly, following the creaks to the attic. The door was locked, but Holmes picked it open with ease. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and crates were stacked high. A single window let in a sliver of gray light. Holmes froze, his eyes fixed on a corner. There, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure in white, a woman, her face veiled, her dress flowing like mist. She stood motionless, her presence chilling the room. "Clara," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. The figure didn't move. Holmes stepped forward, his voice steady. "Show yourself. This game is over." The figure vanished, as if swallowed by the shadows. Watson blinked, his heart pounding. "Holmes, did you see?" "I saw," Holmes said, his tone grim. "But ghosts don't leave footprints." He pointed to the floor, where faint marks led to a crate. He pried it open, revealing a bundle of white Lysa bride's veil, identical to the one Emily had burned. "This is no curse," Holmes said. "This is a plot, and we're just beginning to unravel it." Chapter 2. The Midnight Visitor. The air in Ravenswood Manor grew colder as night fell, the fog outside pressing against the windows like a living thing. Sherlock Holmes stood in the library, his lantern casting long shadows across the bookshelves. The bundle of white lace from the attic lay on the desk, its delicate threads gleaming faintly. Dr. Watson paced near the fireplace, his revolver tucked in his coat, while Emily Carver sat in a corner, her hands clasped tightly. Holmes's sharp eyes scanned the room. "This veil," he said, holding it up, "is no accident. It's a message, meant to frighten, but by whom? And why now?" Watson stopped pacing, his brow creased. "You don't think it's supernatural, do you?" Holmes's lips twitched. "Watson, you know my views. The supernatural is merely the natural we don't yet understand. These footprints, this veil, they're human work. Our task is to find the hand behind them." Emily's voice was small. "What if it's the Phantom Bride? The villagers say she appears at night, always before someone dies." Holmes turned to her, his gaze steady. "Miss Carver, fear clouds the mind. We deal in facts. Tell me, who else has access to this house?" "Only Thomas, Mrs. Gale, and me," Emily said. "The servants left months ago. The manor's too old, too creepy. And Mr. Blackwood, of course, but he's only been here a week." Holmes nodded, filing the information away. "We'll speak with Blackwood tomorrow. For now, we stay alert. Watson, keep your revolver close. I suspect our visitor from the attic isn't done with us." They agreed to take turns keeping watch. Holmes took the first shift, settling into a chair by the library door, his pipe glowing faintly. Watson and Emily retired to their rooms, though Watson doubted sleep would come easily. The manor creaked and groaned, each sound like a whisper of danger. At midnight, a sharp thud echoed from downstairs. Holmes was on his feet in an instant, lantern in hand. He moved silently, his long shadow trailing him down the staircase. Watson, roused by the noise, joined him, his revolver drawn. Emily followed, her nightgown pale in the dim light. The sound came from the dining hall, a cavernous room with a long oak table and heavy curtains. The air smelled of wax and dust. Holmes held up a hand, signaling silence, and pointed to the far wall. A window stood open, its latch broken, the curtains swaying in the night breeze. "Someone's been here," Holmes whispered. He knelt by the window, examining the sill, mud on the frame, fresh boots, size 10, deep tread. Our visitor was careless. Watson peered into the darkness outside. "They're gone now." "Perhaps," Holmes said, his eyes scanning the room. He froze, his gaze locking on the table. A single object lay there, a small, silver locket, its chain glinting in the lantern's glow. Emily gasped. "That's not mine. I've never seen it before." Holmes picked it up, his fingers careful. The locket was old, engraved with a rose and dagger, the same symbol as the letter's seal. He opened it, revealing a faded portrait of a young woman, in a white dress, her face solemn. "The phantom bride?" Watson asked, his voice low. Holmes didn't answer. He turned the locket over, noting a faint scratch on the back. "Initials," he said. "C.R. possibly Clara, the bride from the legend. But this locket was placed here tonight." "Why?" Emily clutched her shawl. "To scare me. To make me think the curse is real." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Or to distract us. This is a game, Miss Carver, and someone is playing it well." He pocketed the locket and moved to the window, studying the ground outside. "The tracks lead to the garden." "Watson, stay with Miss Carver. I'll follow them." Watson protested. "Holmes, it's pitch black out there. You can't go alone." "I must," Holmes said. "Time is short. Guard the house. If I'm not back by dawn, search the grounds." Before Watson could argue, Holmes slipped through the window, his lantern a faint glow in the fog. Watson led Emily back to the library, locking the door behind them. The manor felt alive with menace, each creak a threat. Hours passed. Watson kept his revolver ready, his eyes on the door. Emily sat by the fire, her face pale but determined. "Mr. Watson," she said softly, "do you think Mr. Holmes will find the truth?" Watson managed to smile. "If anyone can, it's him. He's never met a mystery he couldn't crack." Just before dawn, the library door rattled. Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes's voice called out, "It's me." He stepped inside, his coat damp with fog, his face grim. "What did you find?" Watson asked. Holmes held up a muddy scrap of cloth. "This, caught on a thorn in the garden. Black wool, fine quality. And the tracks led to the edge of the moors, then vanished." "Our visitor knows the terrain well." Emily frowned. "Mr. Blackwood, he was out walking yesterday." "Possibly," Holmes said, "but we need more than suspicion. This cloth could belong to anyone." He turned to Emily. "Tell me about the garden. Anything unusual there?" Emily thought for a moment. "There's an old fountain, dry for years, and a rose arbor, but it's overgrown. Thomas never goes there. He says it's bad luck." Holmes's eyes lit up. "Bad luck. Interesting. We'll investigate at first light. For now, rest if you can. Our midnight visitor has given us a trail to follow." As the first rays of dawn broke through the fog, Holmes, Watson, and Emily stood in the garden. The fountain was cracked, its basin empty, but Holmes circled it, his eyes sharp. He paused at the base, brushing away dirt to reveal a loose stone. With a tug, he lifted it, uncovering a small metal box. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its edges worn. The handwriting matched the threatening letter. It read, "The debt must be paid. The bride demands her due." Watson shook his head. "Another threat. This is madness, Holmes." "Not madness," Holmes said, folding the paper. "A plan. Someone is using the legend of the Phantom Bride to hide their motives. And I intend to find out who." Chapter 3. Shadows of Ravenswood Manor. The morning sun barely pierced the fog that clung to Ravenswood Manor, casting a sickly light over its crumbling stone walls. Sherlock Holmes stood in the garden, the metal box from the fountain tucked under his arm. Dr. Watson rubbed his hands against the chill, his breath visible in the damp air. Emily Carver lingered near the rose arbor, her eyes darting to the manor's dark windows as if expecting a face to appear. Holmes examined the note again, his fingers tracing the sharp, slanted handwriting. "The bride demands her due," he murmured. "A debt. But what kind? Money, revenge, or something older?" Watson frowned, his revolver still heavy in his coat pocket. "It's all riddles, Holmes. This phantom bride nonsense feels like a trick to scare Emily out of her home." Holmes's eyes flicked to him. "A trick, yes, but not nonsense. Someone's using the legend to hide their tracks. This note was hidden carefully, meant to be found, but not by us." He turned to Emily. "Miss Carver, who else knows about the fountain?" Emily shook her head, her bonnet slipping slightly. "No one, as far as I know. It's been dry since I was a child. Thomas avoids the garden, and Mrs. Gale only comes out to hang laundry. Mr. Blackwood, he's been poking around, but I never saw him here." Holmes knelt by the fountain, his long fingers brushing the dirt. The stone was loose, but the box was buried shallow. "All culprits in a hurry or careless." He stood, brushing off his hands. "We need to see the manors, records, deeds, letters, anything tied to this debt." They returned to the library, where the air smelled of old leather and mildew. The fire had died, leaving the room cold. Emily led them to a heavy oak cabinet, its doors carved with roses and vines. "Thomas keeps the family papers here," she said, unlocking it with a small key from her pocket. Holmes rifled through the documents, his eyes scanning faded ink. Deeds to the manor, wills, tax records, nothing stood out until he found a thin ledger bound in black leather. Its pages listed payments, dated decades ago, to someone named C. The amounts were large, marked with the same Roseanne dagger symbol. "CR again," Holmes said, showing the ledger to Watson. "The same initials as the locket. Clara, perhaps. But these payments stopped 50 years ago. Why?" Watson squinted at the page. "Could be a coincidence. CR isn't uncommon." Holmes's lips curled. "Coincidences are lazy explanations. Watson, this is a thread. We pull it, and the web unravels." He turned to Emily. "Your family's history, any scandals, betrayals, something tied to this, Clara?" Emily's face tightened. "My grandfather told stories about a bride who died here, but he said they were just tales to scare children. He never mentioned a debt or a Clara. Thomas might know more, but he's distant." Holmes closed the ledger. "We'll speak to Thomas when he returns. For now, I want to see the rose arbor." "You said it's bad luck. Why?" Emily hesitated. "It's just village talk. They say Clara was found there, dead, in her wedding dress. No one goes near it after dark." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Superstition is a mask for truth. Let's go." The rose arbor was a tangle of thorns and dead vines, its iron frame rusted and leaning. The ground was soft, churned by recent rain. Holmes circled it, his lantern held low. He stopped at a patch of disturbed earth, kneeling to dig with his hands. Watson and Emily watched, the silence heavy. Holmes unearthed a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was a silver ring, simple but old, engraved with a tiny rose. "Another relic," he said, holding it up. "Left here recently. The soil's too fresh." Watson's voice was tight. "Another bride's token. This is getting eerie." "Holmes, not eerie," Holmes said. "Calculated. Someone's staging a ghost story, and they're leaving props to sell it." He pocketed the ring and stood, scanning the arbor. "The manor's walls have eyes. We're being watched." Emily shivered. "You mean someone's out there?" Now, Holmes didn't answer. Instead, he moved to the manor's west wall, where ivy clung thickly. He pushed the vines aside, revealing a narrow window, its glass cracked. "This faces the arbor," he said. "A perfect spot to spy." Watson peered through the window. It opened into a dusty storeroom, filled with crates and old furniture. Could someone hide in there? Icily Holmes said. He climbed through, his movements swift and silent. Watson and Emily followed, struggling to keep up. The storeroom smelled of mold, its floorboards creaking underfoot. Holmes's lantern swept the space, pausing on a crate pushed against the wall. He pried it open, revealing a stack of papers, letters, all unsigned, all in the same sharp handwriting as the threatening note. They mentioned the debt, Clara's vengeance, and Ravenswood's fall. One letter, newer than the rest, was addressed to T.C. Likely Thomas Carver. Holmes read it aloud. The time is near. Pay what's owed, or the bride will claim her due. Watson shook his head. This is no ghost, Holmes. It's blackmail. Blackmail with a theatrical flair, Holmes said. Our culprit knows the manor's history and is using it to terrify. But why target Emily and Thomas? What's the prize? Emily's voice trembled. The manor. It's all we have left. The land's worth something, but we're not rich. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Money's a motive, but this feels personal. These letters span years. The grudge is old. He gathered the papers. We keep this quiet. No word to Thomas or Blackwood until we know more. As they left the storeroom, a shadow moved in the hallway. Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes grabbed his arm. Wait, he whispered. They crept forward, following the sound of soft footsteps. The hallway led to the main staircase, where a figure in a dark coat stood. Their back to them. Show yourself, Holmes called, his voice cutting through the silence. The figure turned, revealing Mr. Blackwood. His thin face was pale, his scars stark in the lantern's light. Mr. Holmes, he said, his tone smooth but guarded. I didn't expect you so early. Holmes stepped closer, his eyes locked on Blackwood's. And I didn't expect a historian to wander the manor at odd hours. Care to explain? Blackwood smiled faintly. I couldn't sleep. Old houses like this, they speak at night. I was exploring, Holmes echoed, or planting evidence. You've been asking questions about the Carver's past. Why? Blackwood's smile didn't waver. Curiosity. Ravenswood's history is rich with tragedy. The Phantom Bride, for one. Surely you've heard the tales. Too many, Holmes said. And you seem eager to spread them. Where were you last night? In my room, Blackwood said. You can ask Mrs. Gale. She brought me tea at 10. Holmes nodded, but his gaze didn't soften. We'll speak again, Mr. Blackwood. Stay close. Blackwood inclined his head and vanished up the stairs. Watson lowered his revolver, his heart still racing. He's slippery, Holmes. You trust him, not an inch, Holmes said. His boots are clean, but his story's too neat. We'll watch him. Emily clutched the letters. What now, Mr. Holmes? Holmes turned to her, his face grim. We dig deeper. The shadows of Ravenswood hide more than ghosts. By tonight, I expect another move from our foe. Chapter 4. The Curse Unveiled. The afternoon light barely reached Ravenswood Manor's dim halls, swallowed by the heavy drapes and ancient wood. Sherlock Holmes stood in the library, the stack of letters from the storeroom spread across the desk. Dr. Watson leaned over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the cryptic words about Clara's vengeance and the debt. Emily Carver sat nearby, her face pale, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. Holmes held up the silver ring from the rose arbor, its tiny rose engraving catching the light. This ring, he said, is old, but not as old as the manor. The craftsmanship suggests 50 years, not 100. It's no relic of Clara's time if she existed. Watson frowned, his mustache bristling. You think the Phantom Bride's just a story? Holmes's eyes glinted. Stories have power, Watson. Someone's using this one to stir fear. These letters, the ring, the locket, they're props in a carefully staged play. But the motive remains hidden. He turned to Emily. Miss Carver, tell me about your family's enemies. Anyone who'd gain from your fear. Emily shook her head. We keep to ourselves. The villagers gossip, but no one's ever threatened us openly. Except, there's been talk about the land. Farmers want to buy it, but Thomas refuses to sell. Holmes nodded, filing the detail away. Land is a solid motive, but this feels deeper, tied to the past. He tapped the ledger from the cabinet. These payments to CR stopped abruptly. We need to know why. A sharp knock interrupted them. Mrs. Gale poked her head in, her face stern. Mr. Thomas is back from the village. He's in a mood. Wants to see you, Miss Emily. Emily tensed. Did he say why? No, Mrs. Gale said, but he's pacing like a caged dog. Best not keep him waiting. Holmes gathered the letters and ring. We'll all go. I want to see Thomas's reaction to these. They found Thomas Carver in the parlor, a tall man with a haggard face and dark circles under his eyes. His coat was muddy, his hair unkempt. He stopped pacing when he saw them, his gaze flicking from Emily to Holmes. Who are you? He demanded. Sherlock Holmes, Holmes said, his voice calm but firm. And this is Dr. Watson. Your sister hired us to investigate a matter. Thomas's eyes narrowed. What matter? Emily, what's this about? Emily hesitated, but Holmes stepped forward, holding up the threatening letter. This was left for your sister. It mentions a curse. Care to explain? Thomas's face paled, but his jaw tightened. A prank. Village nonsense. We get letters like that sometimes. Holmes raised an eyebrow. Do you? And do they come with veils, lockets, and rings, all marked with a rose and dagger? He laid the items on the table, watching Thomas closely. Thomas froze, his eyes locked on the ring. Where did you find that? The garden, Holmes said. Hidden, but meant to be found. You recognize it, don't you? Thomas turned away, his hands clenched. It's nothing. Old junk from the manor's history. Holmes stepped closer. Lying is unwise, Mr. Carver. These letters mention a debt. Your name appears in them. What do you owe, and to whom? Thomas spun around, his voice sharp. You're meddling in things you don't understand, Holmes. Leave it alone, Emily gasped. Thomas, what's wrong? Why won't you tell me? Thomas's shoulders sagged. I'm trying to protect you, Emily. This house, it's cursed, not by ghosts, but by secrets. I thought I could handle it. Holmes's voice was low. Handle what? Speak plainly, or I'll find the truth without you. Thomas sank into a chair, rubbing his face. It's about Clara, the phantom bride. She was real. Our great-aunt told me the story when I was a boy. Clara was a carver, married to a man named Edward Langley. He betrayed her, stole her dowry, and left her to die on their wedding night. She cursed the family before she died. Every generation, someone pays the price. Watson snorted. A curse. You believe that? Thomas glared. I didn't, until the letters started. They came to Father years ago, demanding money to appease Clara. He paid, and they stopped. Now they're back, and I don't have the money. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Who sent them? I don't know, Thomas said. There, unsigned. I thought it was just blackmail, but then the veil appeared, and now this ring. He trailed off, his voice breaking. Holmes picked up the locket, opening it to show Clara's portrait. This was left last night. You've seen it before. Thomas nodded slowly. It was Clara's father kept it locked away. I don't know how it got here. Holmes paced, his mind racing. Someone knows your family's secrets. Someone with access to this house. Blackwood, perhaps. Thomas's head snapped up. Blackwood. He's just a historian. He's been nosing around, but I didn't think. You should, Holmes said. His interest in your family is no coincidence. Where is he now? Out, Mrs. Gale said, lingering by the door. Said he was visiting the village church to check old records. Holmes turned to Watson. We'll go to the church. If Blackwood's digging into the past, we need to know what he's found. The village church was a gray stone building, its graveyard overgrown with weeds. A frail man with thick glasses greeted them warily. Mr. Blackwood was here, he said, asked about the Carver family, especially Clara. I showed him the parish records. Holmes's eyes lit up. Show me. The records were dusty, their pages brittle. Clara Langley, née Carver, died in 1825, the day of her wedding. of death unknown. Her husband, Edward, vanished soon after. The vicar pointed to a note in the margin, written in faded ink, "Cursed be the betrayer." Watson shivered. "Sounds like Clara had enemies. Or allies," Holmes said. "Someone wrote that note. Someone who knew her story." He thanked the vicar and stepped outside, where the fog was thickening. "Blackwood's ahead of us, Watson. He's hunting something, maybe the same debt we're chasing." They returned to the manor as dusk fell, the air heavy with the scent of rain. In the parlor, Emily waited, her face anxious. "Did you find anything?" Holmes nodded. "Clara's story is real, but it's been twisted. Someone's using her name to extort your family. We need to search Blackwood's room." They crept to the guest wing, where Blackwood's door was unlocked. His room was tidy, with a suitcase and a few books on local history. Holmes searched the desk, finding a notebook filled with sketches of the manor, notes on Clara, and a map of the grounds with the fountain circled. "He's no historian," Holmes said, holding up the notebook. "He's hunting something specific. This map suggests he knows about the fountain." Watson's eyes widened. "You think he planted the box?" "Possibly," Holmes said. "Or he's looking for it. Either way, he's part of this." A sudden scream pierced a silent Emily from downstairs. They raced to the parlor, where she stood, pointing at the window. Outside, in the fog, a white figure glided past, its veil trailing like smoke. "The phantom bride," Emily gasped. Holmes dashed to the window, but the figure was gone. "No ghost," he said, his voice firm. "That was human, and they're close." He grabbed his lantern and ran outside, Watson and Emily trailing. The fog swallowed the grounds, but Holmes followed faint footprints to the edge of the moors. There, half hidden by brambles, was a torn piece of white lace. "Another prop," Holmes said, pocketing it. "Our enemies getting bold. By tomorrow, we'll have them." Chapter 5. Whispers in the village. The dawn broke gray and heavy over Ravenswood Manor, the fog curling like fingers around its weathered stones. Sherlock Holmes stood by the parlor window, the scrap of white lace from the moors in his hand. Watson sipped cold tea, his eyes red from a sleepless night. Emily Carver sat on the edge of a chair, her face tight with worry, the scream from last night's ghostly figure still echoing in her mind. Holmes turned the lace over, his sharp eyes catching every thread. "Machine-made," he said, "not old-out phantom bride shops and modern stores, it seems." His voice held a dry edge, but his mind was racing. Watson set his cup down. "So, it's a costume. Someone's dressing up to scare us." "More than scare," Holmes said. "Control. Fear makes people act rashly, sell land, pay debts, or flee. Someone wants the Carvers gone." He glanced at Emily. "Miss Carver, we need to know what the village says." "Gossip often hides truth," Emily nodded, though her hands shook. "The villagers talk about the curse, but they're scared of us. They think Ravenswood's bad luck. I can take you to the inn where they gather." Holmes pocketed the lace. "Good, Watson. Bring your revolver. The village holds answers, and I suspect our foe has ears there." They left the manor, the muddy path to the village slick under their boots. The air smelled of peat and rain, and the moors stretched endless and bleak around them. The village was small, a cluster of stone cottages with smoke curling from chimneys. The Black Raven Inn stood at its heart, its sign creaking in the wind. Inside, the inn was warm but dim, smelling of ale and wood smoke. A dozen locals sat at tables, their voices low. They fell silent when Holmes, Watson, and Emily entered, their eyes wary. The innkeeper, a burly man with a red beard, wiped a glass and nodded. "Miss Carver," he said, "what brings you?" Emily managed a smile. "Just visiting, Mr. Hale. These are my friends, Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson." Hale's eyes flicked to Holmes, who leaned casually against the bar. "We're curious about Ravenswood stories," Holmes said, his tone light. "The phantom bride, for one. What do folks say?" Hale's face tightened, but a gray-haired woman at a nearby table spoke up. "She's real, sir. Clara Langley, betrayed and murdered. Her spirit walks the moors, seeking vengeance." Always takes a carver when the moon's full. Watson raised an eyebrow. Takes? You mean kills? The woman nodded, her voice dropping. My gran saw her once, in a white veil, by the manor. Next day, old Mr. Carver Millie's great-uncle died. Fell down the stairs, they said, but his face was pure terror. Holmes listened, his face unreadable. And this curse one did. It start. After Clara died, a thin man with a pipe said, her husband, Edward, was a snake, stole her money and ran. She cursed the Carvers for letting it happen. Every few years, someone pays. Emily's voice was small. That's just a story, isn't it? The locals exchanged glances. Hale cleared his throat. Stories are not, miss. Your families had bad luck, fires, accidents, deaths. And now you're getting those letters. Holmes's eyes sharpened. Letters. You know about them. Hale froze, then shrugged. Village talk. Word gets around. Too quickly, Holmes said, his voice low. Who's spreading it? No one answered, but the gray-haired woman leaned forward. Ask Mr. Blackwood. He's been poking into Clara's tale, asking odd questions. Says he's writing a book, but he's too nosy for my liking. Holmes nodded, filing the detail away. Thank you. If you hear more, send word to the manor. He slipped a coin to Hale and led Watson and Emily outside. Watson pulled his coat tighter against the wind. They're scared, Holmes, but they know more than they're saying. Fear makes tongues cautious, Holmes said. Blackwood's stirred them up. He's not just hunting history, he's fanning the curse's flames. He turned to Emily. Who in the village might talk freely? Someone old, with long memories. Emily thought for a moment. Old Meg, the weaver. She lives by the church. She's half blind, but sharp as a tack. She knew my grandfather. They found Meg's cottage, a tiny place with a sagging roof. The old woman sat by a loom, her gnarled hands working thread, her milky eyes fixed on them as they entered, as if she saw more than she should. Emily Carver, she rasped. I smelled trouble on you. Holmes sat across from her, his voice gentle. We're here about Clara Langley. What do you know? Meg's hands stilled. Clara was no ghost in my day. She was flesh and blood, married to a devil named Edward. He took her land, jewels, and left her to die in that manner. The Carvers hushed it up, paid folks to forget, but Clara's kin didn't. Holmes leaned forward. Her kin, who were they? Meg's lips curled. The Rosiers. Clara's maiden name was Rosier, not Carver. Her brother, James, swore revenge. He vanished, but his children stayed near, always watching the Carvers. Look for the Roseanne dagger. Mark that's their sign. Watson's eyes widened. The symbol on the locket and letters. Holmes nodded, his mind racing. Miss Rosier's family is alive, and they've not forgotten. Thank you, Meg. He pressed a coin into her hand and stood. We need to find Blackwood. If he's tied to the Rosiers, he's no bystander. They returned to the manor as rain began to fall, the moors darkening under heavy clouds. Mrs. Gale met them at the door, her face pale. Mr. Blackwood's back, she whispered, and he's with Thomas in the study. They're arguing. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Perfect. Stay here, Miss Carver. Watson, with me. They crept to the study door, which was ajar. Inside, Thomas's voice was sharp. I told you, Blackwood, I can't pay. The manor's all we have left. Blackwood's reply was cold. Then sell it. The debt's due. Carver, Clara's blood demands it. Holmes pushed the door open, his presence filling the room. Clara's blood, Mr. Blackwood, or the Rosier's greed. Blackwood froze, his scar stark against his pale face. Thomas gaped, his hands trembling. Holmes, what's this about? Holmes held up the lace and the notebook from Blackwood's room. You're no historian, Blackwood. You're hunting a debt tied to Clara Rosier. Her family's mark is on everything, letters, lockets, rings. Care to explain? Blackwood's smile was thin. You're clever, Holmes, but you're meddling in old wounds. The Carvers owe my family, Clara's family. They let her die, and we've paid the price ever since. Your family? Watson asked, his revolver half drawn. Blackwood nodded. I'm a Rosier by blood. My great-uncle was James. The Carver's wealth was built on Clara's stolen dowry. We want it back. Holmes's voice was icy. By terrorizing Emily, staging a ghost. You're no avenger, Blackwood. You're a blackmailer. Blackwood's eyes flashed. Call it what you like. The debt stands. He moved toward the door, but Watson blocked him. Not so fast, Watson said. Holmes turned to Thomas. You knew about the Rosiers, didn't you? That's why you've been selling land. Thomas slumped. I thought I could settle it quietly, but they keep asking for more. Holmes pocketed the notebook. We're done with games, Blackwood. You'll stay where I can see you. And, tonight, we'll draw out your phantom bride. As night fell, Holmes set a trap. He left the parlor window open, the locket on the table as bait. He, Watson, and Emily hid in the shadows, waiting. At midnight, a figure in white slipped through the window. Reaching for the locket, Holmes sprang forward, grabbing the figure's arm. The veil fell, revealing not Blackwood, but Mrs. Gale, her face twisted with fear. Mrs. Gale, Emily gasped. Holmes's grip didn't waver. Explain yourself. Mrs. Gale's voice shook. I'm a Rosier, too. I've served here to watch the Carvers. Blackwood promised we'd get our due, but I never meant to hurt anyone. Holmes's eyes narrowed. You planted the veil, the letters. She nodded, tears falling. To scare Emily away. The Manor's curses, taken to many. Holmes released her. The only curse is greed. Watson, lock her in her room. We're not done. Chapter 6. The Locked Room, Enigma. The rain-battered Ravenswood Manor, drumming against its ancient windows as night deepened. Sherlock Holmes stood in the parlor, his sharp eyes fixed on Mrs. Gale, who sat trembling in a chair. Dr. Watson guarded the door, his revolver in hand, while Emily Carver hovered nearby, her face a mix of shock and betrayal. The revelation of Mrs. Gale's Rosier blood and her role in the Phantom Bride scheme hung heavy in the air. Holmes's voice was calm but cutting. Mrs. Gale, you've admitted to planting the veil and letters. But the figure in white last night, that wasn't you. Who else is playing the ghost? Mrs. Gale's eyes darted to the floor. I don't know, I swear it. Blackwood told me to leave the tokens, to scare Miss Emily. He said it was enough. I never saw anyone else. Holmes leaned closer, his gaze piercing. You're lying, or you're blind. Someone else is in this house, moving freely. Where's Blackwood now? Mrs. Gale shook her head. He left after supper, said he was meeting someone in the village. Watson frowned. In this storm, sounds like he's running. Or planning, Holmes said. He turned to Emily. Miss Carver, lock Mrs. Gale in her room. Watson, check Blackwood's quarters. Again, I'll search Thomas's study. Our foe's next move is coming, and we need every clue. Emily hesitated. What about Thomas? He's upstairs, but he's been so quiet. Holmes's eyes narrowed. We'll deal with him soon. First, we secure the house. Watson escorted Mrs. Gale to her room, locking the door, while Emily followed Holmes to the study. The room was dark, its air thick with the smell of ink and dust. Holmes lit a lantern, revealing Thomas's cluttered desk papers, ledgers, and a half-empty brandy glass. He rifled through the drawers, finding nothing new, until he noticed a faint scratch on the floor near the bookshelf. Curious, Holmes muttered, kneeling. He pressed the floorboard, and a soft click sounded. A panel in the bookshelf slid open, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a single letter, its wax seal broken, marked with the Roseanne dagger symbol. The handwriting was familiar, but the message was new. The locked room holds the truth. Find it before the moon rises. Holmes's lips twitched. A challenge. Our culprit loves games. Emily's voice trembled. Locked room. What does it mean? Holmes stood, pocketing the letter. Ravenswood's secrets are in its walls. We need to find this room. He glanced at the window, where rain streaked the glass, and we need to hurry. Watson returned, his face grim. Blackwood's room is empty. His suitcase is gone, but I found this. He held up a scrap of paper with a sketch of a door, labeled East Wing, 3rd floor. Holmes's eyes gleamed. The locked room. Let's go. The East Wing was a maze of dusty corridors, its air cold and stale. The 3rd floor was worse. Cobwebs draped the walls, and the floorboards groaned underfoot. They found a heavy oak door, its lock rusted but intact. No keyhole, no handle, just a smooth surface with a faint rose carving. Emily shivered. I've never been here. Thomas said this wing was unsafe. Holmes traced the carving. Unsafe or hidden. He pressed a rose, but nothing happened. He tapped the door, listening. Hollow. There's a space behind it. He pulled a thin metal tool from his pocket and worked the lock's edges, searching for a mechanism. After minutes of silence, a click echoed. The door creaked open, revealing a small, windowless room. The air was thick with dust, and the lantern's light showed a single object, a wooden chest, its lid carved with roses and daggers. Watson's voice was low. This feels like a trap. Holmes. Traps are only dangerous if you're careless, Holmes said. He knelt by the chest, examining its lock. No key, but it's old. A simple pin will do. He worked quickly, and the lid sprang open. Inside was a bundle of yellowed papers, a small portrait, and a gold ring, heavier than the one from the arbor. The portrait showed a young woman, Clara, her face matching the locket's image. The papers were letters, written in a woman's hand, detailing Edward Langley's betrayal and Clara's despair. One letter, dated the day of her death, ended with, "My blood will haunt them. The debt is eternal." Emily gasped. Clara wrote these. Holmes nodded. Her words, her pain. Someone's using them to fuel this curse. He lifted the gold ring, noting its weight. This was her wedding band. Valuable, but left here. Why? Watson's eyes scanned the room, to keep the story alive, or to hide something else. Holmes's fingers brushed the chest's lining, finding a false bottom. He pried it open, revealing a small leather book, a journal. Its pages listed names, dates, and payments, all tied to the Rosiers. The last entry, dated a month ago, read, "TC refuses. The bride must act," Thomas Holmes said. He's been dodging the Rosiers' demands. But this journal's recent. Someone's been here. He closed the chest and stood. "We take these." The rooms served its purpose. As they left, a loud crash came from downstairs. They raced to the parlor, where Thomas stood, his face ashen, staring at a shattered mirror. Shards littered the floor, and a white veil lay among them, fresh and untouched by the glass. "Thomas," Emily cried. "What happened?" Thomas's voice shook. "I didn't do it. I came down, and it fell." The veil was there. Holmes knelt by the mirror, his eyes sharp. No accident. The frames, tampered with, cut to break. He picked up the veil, noting its modern stitching. Another prop. Our foes in the house. Watson gripped his revolver. "Blackwood, or an ally," Holmes said. "Thomas, where were you an hour ago?" Thomas stammered. "In my room, I swear." Holmes's gaze didn't waver. "We'll see. Watson, check the grounds. Emily, stay with Thomas. I'll search the attic again." Watson braved the rain, finding no tracks in the mud. Holmes scoured the attic, but the crates held no new clues. By midnight, they regrouped in the library. The chest's contents spread out. The journal's final pages mentioned a vault under the manor where Clara's dowry was hidden. "A vault?" Emily asked. "I've never heard of it." Holmes's eyes burned. "It's the prize. The Rosiers want Clara's gold, and they'll burn this house down to get it. Tomorrow, we find that vault and our phantom bride." Chapter 7. A trail of white-laced rain had stopped, but the air around Ravenswood Manor hung heavy with damp and secrets. Sherlock Holmes stood in the library, the leather journal from the locked room open on the desk. Its pages spoke of a hidden vault and Clara's dowry, a fortune the Rosiers believed was theirs. Dr. Watson cleaned his revolver by the fire, his face tense, while Emily Carver clutched the gold ring from the chest, her eyes wide with fear. The shattered mirror and fresh veil from the parlor lay nearby, stark reminders of the unseen foe stalking the house. Holmes traced a line in the journal. "This vault," he said, his voice low, "is the heart of the mystery. Clara's jewels, land deeds is hidden somewhere in this manor. The Rosiers, Blackwood included, are desperate to find it. But why now?" Watson looked up, his hand steady on the gun. "The Carvers are broke, aren't they? Thomas said they can't pay. Maybe the Rosiers see their chance." Holmes nodded, his eyes sharp. "A weak prey draws the hunter. But this game's older than Thomas's debts. The journal mentions payments to the Rosiers for decades." Then silence. Something's stirred them awake. He turned to Emily. "Miss Carver, any family stories about a vault? A cellar, perhaps?" Emily shook her head, her voice small. "Nothing. The manor's full of old rooms, but I've never heard of a vault. Thomas might know. He's been poking through Father's papers lately." Holmes's lips twitched. "Thomas knows more than he's saying. We'll confront him at dawn. For now, we follow the trail." He held up the veil from the parlor, its white lace gleaming. "This was placed deliberately. It's a clue, not a threat." Watson frowned. "A clue to what? Another ghost trick?" "No trick," Holmes said. "A path. This lace matches the one from the moors. Our foes leaving breadcrumbs, daring us to follow." He examined the fabric, noting a faint stain oil, barely visible. "This came from somewhere mechanical. A cellar, perhaps, or a shed." Emily shivered. "There's an old groundskeeper's shed by the garden. It's locked, but Thomas has the key." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Then we start there. Watson, bring the lantern. Miss Carver, stay here and lock the door. If Thomas or Blackwood appears, don't let them in." The shed stood at the garden's edge, half hidden by thorns and ivy. Its door was rusted, the lock heavy but intact. Holmes worked it with his tools, the click loud in the quiet night. Inside, the air smelled of oil and earth. Tools hung on the walls, and a workbench held a jumble of gears and chains. In the corner, a trapdoor lay under a pile of sacks. Holmes cleared the sacks, revealing a wooden hatch. "Clever," he muttered. "Hidden in plain sight." He pried it open, exposing a stone staircase descending into darkness. The air below was cold, damp, and thick with the scent of mold. Watson gripped his revolver. This could be the vault, or a trap. "Both, likely," Holmes said, his lantern casting shadows on the steps. "Stay close." The stairs led to a narrow tunnel, its walls rough stone. Cobwebs brushed their faces as they moved, the lantern's light barely cutting the gloom. The tunnel ended at a heavy iron door, its surface etched with a rosen dagger. A keyhole gleamed, but no key was in sight. Holmes examined the door, his fingers tracing the etching. "This is old, but maintained. Someone's been here recently on the hinges." He pulled a small bottle from his pocket, sprinkling powder around the keyhole. "No fingerprints. Our foes careful." Watson's voice was tight. "Can you open it?" Holmes worked the lock, his tools clicking softly. After a tense minute, the door groaned open, revealing a small chamber. The walls were bare stone, but the floor held a single object, a white lace shawl, neatly folded, with a note pinned to it. The note read, "The dowry is near. Leave, or join Clara." Holmes picked up the shawl, his eyes narrowing. Another prop, but this note's fresh ink's barely dry. He scanned the chamber, noting scuff marks on the floor. "Someone stood here, not long ago." The trail continues. Watson's brow furrowed. "Why leave these clues? It's like they want us to find the vault." Holmes's lips curled. "They do. This is a game, Watson. They're testing us, or distracting us. The real prize is elsewhere." He pocketed the note and shawl, then froze. A faint scraping sound came from the tunnel behind them. Watson raised his revolver. "Someone's there." Holmes doused the lantern, plunging them into darkness. The scraping grew closer, then stopped. A soft thud echoed, like a door closing. Holmes relit the lantern and moved swiftly back to the tunnel, finding nothing but a single white thread caught on a stone. "They're fast," Holmes said, holding up the thread, "and they know the manor's secrets better than we do." They returned to the library, where Emily waited, her face pale. "Did you find it?" she asked. Holmes showed her the shawl and note. A step closer. But not there yet. The vault's real. But this chamber's a decoy. The Rogers Zor, their agent, are leading us in circles. A sudden shout came from upstairs. Thomas's voice. Panicked. They raced to his room, finding him slumped against the wall, a knife in his hand, and a fresh cut on his arm. Blood stained his shirt, and a white laced ribbon lay at his feet. Thomas! Emily cried, rushing to him. Holmes knelt, examining the wound. Shallow, meant to scare, not kill. He picked up the ribbon, noting its modern weave. Who did this, Carver? Thomas's voice shook. I didn't see. I woke, and someone was in the room, dressed in white. They cut me and ran. Holmes's eyes scanned the room. The window was locked, the door untouched. A locked room again, he muttered. Our foes fond of theatrics. He checked the floor, finding a faint oil stain near the bed. They came from the shed's tunnel. There's another entrance here. Watson helped Thomas to a chair. This is madness, Holmes. We're chasing shadows. Not shadows, Holmes said. A plan. The Rogers want the dowry, but they need the Carvers out. This attack on Thomas proves they're desperate. He turned to Emily. Where's Blackwood? Emily shook her head. I haven't seen him since supper. Holmes's face hardened. Then we find him. Watson, bind Thomas's wound. Miss Carver, stay with him. I'll search the grounds. Holmes slipped into the night, the fog thick around him. He followed the oil stains from the shed, tracing them to a hidden grate near the manor's west wall. It led to another tunnel, this one narrower, ending at a trapdoor under the house. Above, he heard footsteps, soft, deliberate. He emerged, in a dusty cellar, its walls lined with crates. A figure in white stood at the far end, their back to him. Enough games, Holmes called, his voice sharp. The figure turned, revealing not Blackwood, but a young woman with dark hair and fierce eyes. She held a knife, its blade glinting. You're too late, Holmes, she said. The dowry's mine. Holmes stepped closer, unafraid. A rosier, I presume. Your family's been busy, she smirked. Clara's blood runs in me. The Carvers will pay. Holmes's eyes locked on hers. With lace and knives. You're no ghost. Surrender, and we'll talk. She lunged, but Holmes sidestepped, grabbing her wrist. The knife clattered to the floor. Watson burst in, revolver raised, followed by Emily. The woman struggled, but Holmes held firm. Who are you? Emily demanded. Lydia Rozier. The woman spat. Clara's kin. This manor's ours. Holmes's voice was cold. You're under arrest, Miss Rozier. The game's over. Chapter 8. The squire's secretly cellar of Ravenswood Manor was cold and damp, its air thick with the smell of earth and old wood. Sherlock Holmes held Lydia Rozier's wrist tightly, her knife now safely in Watson's pocket. Dr. Watson stood by the trap door, his revolver steady, while Emily Carver stared at Lydia, her face a mix of shock and anger. The white lace shawl Lydia had worn as the phantom bride lay crumpled on the floor, its modern stitching exposed in the lantern's glow. Holmes's voice was sharp. Miss Rozier, you've played a bold game. Veils, knives, letters, but the dowry you seek remains hidden. Where's Blackwood, and what's your next move? Lydia's dark eyes burned, but she stayed silent, her lips pressed tight. Holmes tightened his grip. Silence won't help you. Mrs. Gales confessed, and Thomas is wounded. Your plot's unraveling. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling. Why, Lydia? I trusted you. Were you in the manor all along? Lydia's smirk flickered. Not always. The tunnels are old, Miss Carver. Easy to slip in and out. Blackwood taught me the ways. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Blackwood's your leader. Then, where is he? Lydia laughed, a short, bitter sound. You think he's in charge? He's a pawn, like me. The Roziers have waited a century for Clara's justice. The squire knows the truth. Watson frowned. Squire? What squire? Holmes's gaze didn't leave Lydia. She means Thomas Carver. The village calls him squire, don't they? What secret is he hiding, Miss Rozier? Lydia's smile faded. Ask him yourself. He's been bleeding the manor dry, selling land to cover his debts. But the vault's still here, and we'll find it. Holmes released her, stepping back. Watson, tie her hands. We're taking her upstairs. Thomas has some explaining to do. They bound Lydia's wrists with a rope from the cellar and led her to the parlor, where Thomas sat, his arm bandaged. His face paled when he saw Lydia. "Who's this?" he stammered. "Don't play the fool, Carver," Holmes said, pushing Lydia into a chair. "She's a Rosier, like Blackwood and Mrs. Gale. They've been terrorizing your sister, using Clara's legend to force you out. You've known about the Rosier's claim, haven't you?" Thomas's hands shook. I suspected. Father warned me about them years ago, said they'd come for Clara's dowry. I thought I could pay them off, keep them quiet." Emily gasped. "You knew, and you didn't tell me." Thomas looked away, his voice low. "I wanted to protect you, Emily. The manor's all we have. If I sold it, we'd be ruined." Holmes pulled the journal from his coat, slamming it on the table. "This lists payments to the Rosiers, stopped 50 years ago. Why did they start again? And where's the vault?" Thomas's eyes widened. "I don't know about a vault. Father never mentioned it. The payments, they came with threats, like Emily's letter. I sold land to meet them, but it's not enough." Lydia snorted. "Liar. The vault's under this house. Clara's gold, her jewels there hours by." "Right." Holmes turned to her. "And you think cutting Thomas and leaving Lace will find it? Your family's obsession has blinded you." He paced, his mind racing. "The squire's secret isn't just the vault. It's why the Rosiers chose now to strike." Watson's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, Holmes?" Holmes stopped, his eyes fixed on Thomas. "The manor's in debt, yes, but something's changed. Carver, you've been meeting strangers at odd hours. Who are they?" Thomas's face crumpled. "Creditors, and a man named Harrow. He offered to buy the manor, said he'd clear my debts. I refused, but he kept pressing." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Harrow, describe him." "Short, bald, with a gold tooth," Thomas said. "He's not local. Said he's from London." Holmes nodded, filing the detail away. "Harrow's no creditor. He's likely tied to the Rosiers, pushing you to sell so they can search the manor freely." He turned to Lydia. "Is Harrow one of yours?" Lydia's silence was answer enough. Holmes smiled thinly. "Thought so, Watson. Lock Miss Rosier with Mrs. Gale. Emily, stay with Thomas. I need to search the cellar again." Watson escorted Lydia upstairs, her curses echoing. Holmes descended to the cellar, his lantern casting shadows on the crates. He examined the trap door Lydia had used, noting its wheel-oiled hinges. Nearby, a stack of barrels caught his eye. He shifted them, revealing a faint outline in the stone wall, a hidden door. "Sealed tight." Holmes tapped the stone, listening. "Hollow," he muttered. He pressed the edges, finding a loose brick. A soft click sounded, and the door swung open, revealing a narrow passage. The air inside was stale, and a faint glint of metal shone at the passage's end. He followed it, the passage twisting downward. It ended at a steel grate, locked with a modern padlock. Beyond, a cavernous space loomed, too dark to see clearly. Holmes tested the grate, but it held firm. "The vault," he whispered. "Or another decoy." A soft rustle came from behind. Holmes spun, his lantern raised, but no one was there. A single white lace ribbon lay on the ground, fresh and clean. "Bold," he said, pocketing it, but careless. He returned to the parlor, where Watson waited with Emily and Thomas. "I've found a passage," Holmes said. "It leads to a locked grate. The vault's close, but we need the key. Thomas, think any family heirloom, a key your father mentioned." Thomas shook his head. "Nothing. Father only spoke of debts and warnings." Emily's voice was quiet. "What about grandfather's watch? It's old, with the rose engraving. There's a small slot in it, like for a key." Holmes's eyes lit up. "Where is it?" "In my room," Emily said. "Locked in my jewelry box." They hurried upstairs, Emily fetching the watch, a heavy silver piece with a rose and dagger design. Holmes opened it, revealing a tiny key hidden inside. Clever, he said. This may be our answer. As they turned to leave, a loud thud shook the house. Watson drew his revolver, and Holmes led the way downstairs. The front door stood open, rain blowing in. On the floor lay a soaked envelope, marked with the Roseanne dagger seal. Holmes opened it, reading aloud. The squire's time is up. The vault opens tonight. Watson's face hardened. They're coming, Holmes. Holmes nodded, his voice grim. Let them. We'll be ready. Watson, guard the cellar. Emily, Thomas, stay here. I'll set a trap by the grate. As midnight approached, Holmes hid in the passage, the key in his pocket. Footsteps echoed above, then silence. A shadow moved near the grate, and a man's voice hissed, "It's here. Get the lock." Holmes stepped out, his lantern blazing. "Evening, gentlemen." The man spun, revealing a gold-toothed Harrow. Beside him stood Blackwood, his scar stark in the light. Harrow lunged, but Holmes dodged, pinning him against the wall. Watson arrived, revolver raised, and Blackwood froze. "Game's over," Holmes said. "The key's mine, and the vault stays shut until I know the truth." Chapter 9. Footprints in the mist. The cellar of Ravenswood Manor was a maze of shadows, the lantern's light barely cutting through the damp gloom. Sherlock Holmes held Harrow pinned against the cold stone wall, the tiny key from the watch gripped tightly in his other hand. Dr. Watson stood firm, his revolver trained on Blackwood, whose scarred face was taut with anger. The steel grate behind them loomed, guarding the vault that held Clara's dowry, or so the Rosiers believed. Emily Carver and Thomas stood at the cellar's entrance, their faces pale in the flickering light. Holmes's voice was sharp. "Harrow, Blackwood, your scheme's exposed. The lace, the letters, the attacks, all to force the Carvers out. Where does this grate lead, and what's your true aim?" Harrow, his gold tooth glinting, sneered. "You're clever, Holmes, but you're too late. The vault's ours. Clara's dowry belongs to the Rosiers." Blackwood's eyes flicked to the grate. "Open it, Holmes. You'll see the truth." Holmes's grip didn't waver. "Truth doesn't need knives and veils. Watson, bind them. We'll open the vault ourselves." Watson tied Harrow and Blackwood's hands with rope from the cellar, securing them to a crate. Emily clutched Thomas's arm, her voice shaky. "Is it over, Mr. Holmes?" "Not yet," Holmes said, turning to the grate. "The vault holds answers, but I suspect more lies." He slid the key into the padlock, its click loud in the silence. The grate swung open, revealing a dark chamber, its air heavy with dust and age. Holmes raised his lantern, stepping inside. The walls were rough, stone, etched with faint Roseanne dagger symbols. In the center stood a stone pedestal, holding a small iron box. No gold, no jewels, just a box, its surface worn but intact. Watson frowned. "That's it, no dowry." Holmes knelt by the pedestal, examining the box. "Patience, Watson, appearances deceive." He opened it, revealing a bundle of papers, and a single white lace glove, its stitching modern. The papers were deeds, old land titles, marked with the Rosier name, not the Carvers. Emily gasped. "Those aren't ours. What does this mean?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "It means Clara's dowry wasn't gold, it was land. The Rosiers believe it was stolen, and these deeds prove their claim. But why hide them here?" He scanned the chamber, noting fresh footprints in the dust. "Someone's been here recently. Not Harrow or Blackwood. These prints are smaller." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver. "Another Rosier, likely," Holmes said. He pocketed the glove and deeds, then froze. A faint rustle came from the passage outside. "We're not alone." Holmes doused the lantern, plunging the chamber into darkness. Footsteps, light quick echoed in the passage. Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes signaled silence. The footsteps stopped, and a soft thud sounded, like something dropped. Holmes relit the lantern and moved swiftly to the passage, finding a white lace ribbon on the ground, identical to the others. "They're taunting us," Holmes said, his voice low. "This ribbon's fresh, left moments ago." He scanned the passage, but the mist outside swallowed any trace of the intruder. Thomas's voice shook. How are they moving so fast? The manor's locked. Holmes's lips curled. Tunnels, Carver. This house is riddled with them. Our foe knows every inch. He turned to Watson. Take Harrow and Blackwood to the parlor. Miss Carver, Thomas, stay with them. I'll follow the trail. Watson hesitated. Alone, Holmes. It's too dangerous. Danger's my trade, Holmes said, his eyes burning. Guard our prisoners. I'll be back by dawn. Holmes slipped into the mist, the ribbon in his hand. The moors were thick with fog, the air cold and heavy. He followed faint footprints, small, delicate, like a woman's leading from the cellar grate to the edge of the garden. They vanished near a gnarled oak, its roots tangled in the earth. Holmes knelt, brushing dirt away, and found a hidden trapdoor, barely visible under moss dot. He pried it open, revealing another tunnel. The air inside was stale, but fresh scuff marks showed recent use. Holmes descended, his lantern casting jagged shadows. The tunnel twisted, ending at a small chamber with a wooden door. Beyond, he heard voices low, urgent. Holmes pressed his ear to the door. A woman's voice, sharp and commanding, said, "The deeds are gone." Holmes found the vault. "We move tonight." A man's voice replied, "What about Lydia and Blackwood?" "Forget them," the woman snapped. "They've served their purpose. The manor's ours once the Carvers are gone." Holmes eased the door open, peering inside. A tall woman with gray hair stood over a table, a map of Ravenswood spread out. She wore a dark cloak, a Roseanne dagger pendant at her neck. Beside her was a young man, his face unfamiliar, holding a knife. Holmes stepped in, his voice calm. "Good evening. Planning a theft, I presume." The woman spun, her eyes narrowing. "Holmes, you're persistent, and you're careless," Holmes said, noting the lace scraps on the table. "You're the true phantom bride, aren't you, leading the Rosier's charge?" She smiled coldly. "Margaret Rosier. Clara was my great-aunt. Her dower, her land, was stolen by the Carvers. I'm taking it back," Holmes gestured to the map, "by scaring Emily and Thomas. Your family's waited a century. Why now?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "The Carvers are weak. Thomas's debts gave us an opening. The village fears the curse, and we used it. The deeds prove our claim." Holmes nodded. "And the lace, a theatrical touch. A reminder," Margaret said. "Clara died in her wedding lace. We honor her." The young man lunged, knife raised, but Holmes sidestepped, tripping him. Margaret reached for a pistol, but Holmes was faster, knocking it from her hand. "Enough," he said. "Your plot's done." Watson burst in, revolver drawn, followed by Emily and Thomas. "Holmes, we heard voices." Holmes tied Margaret and the young man's hands. "Meet Margaret Rosier, the mastermind. Her family's been weaving this curse for years." Emily's voice trembled. "The deeds, are they really yours?" Margaret's gaze was hard. "Ask your brother. The Carvers built their wealth on our blood." Thomas hung his head. "I didn't know Emily. Father hinted at old wrongs, but I never saw those deeds." Holmes pocketed the map. "The truth lies in the papers. We'll take them to the authorities." For now, these two joined their kin upstairs. As they led Margaret and her accomplice to the parlor, the mist outside thickened, hiding the moors. Holmes's face was grim. "The Rosiers are caught, but the vault's secrets aren't fully ours. Something's missing, a final piece." Chapter 10. The Cryptic Diary. The parlor of Ravenswood Manor was a cage of tension, the fire casting flickering shadows on the faces of its occupants. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, the deeds and lace scraps from the vault spread before him. Dr. Watson guarded the bound prisoners, Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, and Margaret Rosier, whose eyes burned with defiance. Emily Carver clutched Thomas's arm, her face pale as she processed the Rosier's plot to reclaim Clara's dowry. The storm outside raged, rattling the windows, as if the manor itself protested the secrets being unearthed. Holmes's sharp gaze fixed on Margaret. "Your family's vendetta is clear, Miss Rosier. The deeds prove Clara's land was taken. But these theatrical games, veils, knives, Letters suggest more than greed. What's the final piece of your plan? Margaret's lips curled. You've got the deeds, Holmes. That's enough. The carver's time is up. Holmes leaned closer, his voice low. Not quite. The vault was too easy to find. You wanted us there. Why? Margaret stayed silent, her eyes cold. Holmes turned to the deeds, examining their faded ink. These are old, but one's newer. Transfer of land to a J. Harrow dated last month. Our friend here. He glanced at Harrow, whose gold tooth glinted as he shifted uncomfortably. Watson frowned, his revolver steady. Harrow's a Rozier too. Likely an alias, Holmes said. The Roziers are clever, hiding behind names. But this deed's a clue to something bigger. He turned to Thomas. Carver, you've been selling land to cover debts. Did you sign this? Thomas shook his head, his voice weak. No, I refused Harrow's offer. That's not my signature. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Forged, then the Roziers planned to claim the land legally once you were scared off. He pocketed the deed and turned to Emily. Miss Carver, you mentioned your grandfather's watch. Did he leave anything else? A diary, perhaps. Emily's brow furrowed. He kept a journal, but it's locked in the attic. I never read it. Tomas said it was nonsense. Holmes's lips twitched. Nonsense often hides truth. Fetch it. Emily hurried upstairs, returning with a small, leather-bound book. Its cover worn and marked with a faint rose and dagger symbol. The lock was rusted, but Holmes pried it open with a tool. The pages were filled with tight, hurried script from Emily's grandfather, Henry Carver. Holmes read aloud. The Roziers will never forgive us. Clara's death was no accident. Edward took her life, and we hid it. The dowry, her land is buried in the vault, but the key is lost. I fear they'll come for us. Emily gasped. Grandfather knew Clara was murdered. Holmes nodded, turning the pages. He did, and he knew the Roziers' claim was real. This diary's dangerous proof of your family's guilt. He paused at a cryptic entry. The true vault lies beneath the chapel, not the cellar. Only, the rose opens it. Watson's eyes widened. Another vault. The cellar was a decoy. Precisely, Holmes said. The Roziers found the cellar vault, but the real prize is elsewhere. The chapel where's it located? Thomas's voice was hoarse. Behind the manor, in the woods. It's old, half-ruined. We never use it. Holmes closed the diary. Then that's our next stop. Watson, keep the prisoners here. Emily, Thomas, with me. Margaret lunged against her ropes. You'll find nothing, Holmes. The chapel's empty. Holmes's smile was cold. We'll see. The chapel stood in a clearing, its stone walls crumbling, ivy choking the stained glass windows. The air was thick with moss and decay, the storm's thunder rolling in the distance. Holmes carried the diary, his lantern cutting through the mist. Emily and Thomas followed, their faces tense. Inside, the chapel was a showpews rotted, altar cracked. Holmes scanned the floor, finding a stone slab with a rose carving. Here, he said, kneeling. He pressed the carving, but it didn't move. He opened the diary again, reading. The rose turns with the blood's key. Emily frowned. Blood's key. Holmes examined the slab, noting a small groove. A literal key, perhaps, or something else. He pulled the gold ring from the cellar vault, its rose engraving matching the slab. He pressed it into the groove. Twisting, a low rumble sounded, and the slab slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase. Watson's voice echoed in Holmes's mind. Another trap, Holmes. But he pushed forward, descending. The stairs led to a small chamber, its walls lined with stone. At its center was a heavy iron chest, its lid etched with roses and daggers. A keyhole gleamed, but the watch's key didn't fit. Holmes's brow furrowed. The blood's key isn't the ring. He turned to Emily and Thomas. Your family's blood, Clara's blood. The Carvers and Roziers are linked. Is there a family relic? Something tied to Clara? Thomas's eyes widened. Mother's necklace. It's in her old room, locked away. A rose pendant, with a red stone. Fetch it, Holmes said. Thomas returned with the necklace, its red stone glinting like blood. Holmes pressed it into the keyhole, and the chest clicked open. Inside were gold coins, jewels, and a stack of letters, all marked with the rosier seal. A note atop them read, "Clara's dowry, stolen by Edward, hidden by Henry. The curse lives." Emily's voice trembled. "This is what they wanted." Holmes nodded. "And what your family hid. The Rosier's claim is real, but their methods terror are not." He gathered the letters, but a faint creak came from above. He doused the lantern, pulling Emily and Thomas into the shadows. Footsteps descended slow, deliberate. A figure in white appeared, holding a knife. Not Margaret, not Lydia man, his face hidden by a veil. Holmes sprang, tackling him. The veil fell, revealing a stranger with wild eyes. "Who are you?" Holmes demanded, pinning him. "James Rosier's son," the man spat. "The dowry's mine." Watson burst in, having left the prisoners with Mrs. Gale. "Holmes, the others are secure." Holmes tied the man's hands. "Another Rosier. Your family's persistent." He turned to Emily. "The dowry's yours to decide on. The law will settle the deeds, but the Rosier's reign of terror ends tonight." Chapter 11. A glimpse of the phantom. The chapel's stone chamber was a vault of secrets, its air thick with dust and the weight of old betrayals. Sherlock Holmes stood over the open chest, its contents gold coins, jewels, and Rosier letters gleaming in the lantern's dim glow. Dr. Watson guarded the bound stranger, James Rosier's son, whose wild eyes still burned with defiance. Emily Carver clutched the necklace with its blood-red stone, her face pale, while Thomas slumped against a wall, his guilt laid bare by the direst revelations. The storm outside rumbled, shaking the manor's ancient bones. Holmes's voice cut through the silence. "The dowry's found, but the game's not over. This man," he gestured to the prisoner, "is another Rosier, but not the last. Someone's still moving in the shadows." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver. "How many Rosiers are there, Holmes? We've got Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, and now this one." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "A family with a century-long grudge breeds many players, but their leader's still hidden. Margaret claimed to be in charge, yet this man acted alone." He turned to the prisoner. "Who sent you to the chapel?" The man spat, his voice rough. "No one. I followed the trail. The dowry's my birthright." Holmes leaned closer, his gaze piercing. "You're a poor liar. Your boots are clean, but the tunnel's muddy. Someone let you in. Who?" The man's silence was broken by a faint creak from the staircase above. Holmes doused the lantern, plunging the chamber into darkness. "Quiet," he whispered, pulling Emily and Thomas behind the chest. Watson raised his revolver, his breath steady. A soft glow appeared at the staircase's mouth. A figure in white, veiled, gliding silently. The air grew colder, and Emily stifled a gasp. "The phantom bride," she whispered. Holmes's hand tightened on her arm. "No ghost," he hissed. "Watch." The figure paused, holding a small lantern. Its light revealed a woman's silhouette, but the veil hid her face. She moved toward the chest, her hands reaching for the open lid. Holmes sprang, grabbing her wrist. The veil fell, exposing a young woman with sharp features and dark eyes. Not Margaret, not Lydia, but a stranger, another Rosier. Holmes demanded, his grip firm. The woman struggled, her voice low. "Let me go, Holmes. You don't understand." "I understand greed," Holmes said. "Your name, now." "Eliza Rosier," she said, her eyes flashing. "Clara's kin. The Carvers stole everything, our land, our name. That chest is ours." Watson stepped forward, revolver steady. "You're the one leaving lace and letters, aren't you?" Eliza's lips curled. "A family tradition. Fear opens doors. We," scared Emily, and Thomas cracked. Emily's voice shook. "You terrorized us for gold." "Not gold," Eliza said. "Justice. Clara died for this manor. We'll take it back." Holmes released her, but kept her pinned with his gaze. "Justice doesn't need knives or veils." "You're under arrest, Miss Rosier Watson. Tie her hands." As Watson bound Eliza, a loud crash echoed from above. Thomas jumped. "What was that?" Holmes's eyes flicked to the staircase. "Our foe's not done," Watson, take Eliza to the parlor with the others. Emily, Thomas, stay close. We're going up. They climbed to the chapel, finding the altar toppled, its stone cracked. A white lace ribbon lay on the floor, fresh and clean, with a note pinned to it. The phantom sees all. Leave or die. Holmes picked up the note, his face grim. They're desperate now. The dowry's found, but they're still playing the ghost. He examined the ribbon, noting a faint scent: lavender, not oil. This came from inside the manor, not the tunnels. We have another player. Watson's brow furrowed. Inside, but we've got everyone, Mrs. Gale, the Rosiers. Not everyone, Holmes said. Thomas, you've been hiding something. The diary said your father knew of Clara's murder. What else did he tell you? Thomas's face crumpled. Nothing clear. Just warnings. Keep the manor. Don't trust strangers. He burned papers before he died. Said they were dangerous. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Burned papers. Where? The old study, Thomas said. In the West Wing. It's locked now. Holmes led them to the West Wing, a decaying maze of creaking floors and peeling wallpaper. The study door was heavy oak, its lock rusted. Holmes picked it open, revealing a room thick with dust. A fireplace held ashes, and a desk was cluttered with charred paper scraps. Holmes sifted through the ashes, finding a half-burned letter. Its handwriting matched the diaries. The Rosiers know. The chapel vault is safe, but the second key is with her. He held it up. Her, Clara, or someone else. Emily's hand went to the necklace. Mother's pendant. Could it be? Her Holmes nodded. Possibly. The pendant opened the chest, but the diary mentioned a Blood's key. There's another lock. He searched the desk, finding a hidden drawer. Inside was a small brass key, etched with a rose. This may be it. A sudden gust blew through the room, though the windows were shut. A white figure flickered at the door, a veiled shape, gone. In an instant, Emily screamed, and Watson fired, the shot echoing. The bullet hit the wall, leaving only a wisp of lace behind. Holmes's voice was calm. They're fast, but not invisible. The lavender scent. Checked the servants' quarters. Someone's using perfume to mask their trail. They searched the quarters, finding a bottle of lavender oil in Mrs. Gale's room, but she was still locked away. Holmes's brow furrowed. She's not our phantom. Someone else is in this house. As dawn broke, the manor grew quiet, but the tension remained. Holmes gathered everyone in the parlor, prisoners, Carvers, and Watson. The Rosiers are caught, he said, but the true phantom's still free. This key, he held up the brass key, will open the final secret. Tonight, we end this. Chapter 12. The Stolen Relic. The morning light seeped weakly through Ravenswood Manor's grimy windows, casting a pale glow over the parlor. Sherlock Holmes stood by the fireplace, the brass key with its rose etching glinting in his hand. Dr. Watson sat near the bound. Rosiers, Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Eliza, and James's son, whose sullen glares followed every move. Emily Carver clutched the necklace with its blood-red stone, her eyes red from sleeplessness, while Thomas slumped in a chair, his face heavy with guilt. The white lace ribbon from the West Wing study, scented with lavender, lay on the table, a taunting reminder of the unseen phantom bride. Holmes's voice was steady but sharp. This key unlocks the final secret, a second lock, likely tied to Clara's dowry. But our foe's one step ahead, leaving lace and notes to distract us. The lavender scent suggests someone close, inside the manor. He turned to Emily. Miss Carver, any family relics besides the necklace and watch? Something small, easily hidden. Emily frowned, thinking. There's a locket. Mother's, not Clara's. It's silver, with a rose clasp. I keep it in my room, but I haven't checked it since the trouble started. Holmes's eyes lit up. A locket, perfect for hiding a key or clue. Fetch it, quickly. Emily hurried upstairs, but returned moments later, her face ashen. It's gone. The jewelry box was open, and the locket's missing. Watson's hand went to his revolver. Stolen when we've been watching the house. Holmes's lips twitched. Our phantom's bold. The theft happened last night, during the chaos in the study. The lavender scent was a diversion. He turned to the prisoners. "One of you knows where it is. Speak." Margaret Rosier smirked. "You're chasing ghosts, Holmes. We're all here." Holmes's gaze locked on her. "Not all. Someone's still free, slipping through the manor's tunnels." He held up the lace ribbon. "This was left deliberately. They want us to know they're close." He turned to Thomas. "Carver, describe the locket." Thomas rubbed his face, his voice low. "Small, silver, with a rose clasp. Mother wore it always. Said it was a family heirloom, older than her." Holmes nodded. "Older than her, possibly Clara's. If it holds a key, it's the final piece." He paced, his mind racing. "The tunnels. We've missed one." The lavender scent came from the servants' quarters, but Mrs. Gale's locked up. "Someone else has access." Watson frowned. "Another servant. We thought they all left." Holmes stopped. "Not a servant. A shadow. Emily, who lived here before Mrs. Gale." Emily's brow furrowed. "Old Nell, the cook. She died last year. But she had a niece, Sarah. She helped in the kitchen sometimes. I haven't seen her since Nell's funeral." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Sarah, a local, familiar with the manor. Where does she live?" "In the village," Emily said. "Near the church. But she's shy, quiet. She wouldn't quiet ones hide the most," Holmes said. "We'll visit her, Watson. Guard the prisoners. Thomas, stay with Emily. I'll check the tunnels first." Holmes descended to the cellar, retracing the passages they'd found. Near the steel grate, he noticed a faint crack in the wall, hidden by dust. He pressed it, and a narrow door opened, revealing a tunnel he hadn't seen before. The air smelled faintly of lavender, and fresh footprints, small, like a woman's. The dirt-floored dot. He followed the tunnel, which twisted upward, ending at a trapdoor under the servants' quarters. It opened into a small room, empty but for a cot and a wooden box. Inside the box was a white lace veil, a bottle of lavender oil, and a folded note. "The locket is safe. The phantom waits." Holmes pocketed the note and veil, his face grim. "Sarah, or someone using her name. They're close." He returned to the parlor, showing Watson and Emily the findings. "The tunnel leads to the servants' quarters. Our phantom's been hiding in plain sight. We go to the village now." The village was quiet, the fog thinning under a weak sun. Sarah's cottage was a tiny, sagging place near the church, its windows dark. Holmes knocked, but no answer came. He picked the lock, and they stepped inside. The air was stale, but a faint lavender scent lingered. A table held a sewing kit, with scraps of white lace matching the manor's tokens. Watson's voice was low. "She's our phantom." Holmes scanned the room, finding a loose floorboard. He pried it up, revealing a small silver locket with a rose clasp. He opened it, finding a tiny brass key inside, identical to the one from the diary. "The second key," he said. "But Sarah's gone." Emily's voice trembled. "Why would she do this?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "She's likely a Rosier, or working for them. The lavender's her mark." He pocketed the locket and key, back to the manor. "The chapel vault needs this key." As they approached Ravenswood, a scream pierced the air. Mrs. Gale's voice from the parlor. They raced inside, finding the prisoners still bound. But Mrs. Gale was pale, pointing to the window. "I saw her, the phantom, in white, outside." Watson checked the window, finding no tracks in the mud. "Another trick." Holmes's face hardened. "No trick. A warning. Sarah circling us." He held up the locket. "This is what she wants. Tonight, we open the vault and end this." They returned to the chapel, the brass key from the diary and the locket's key in Holmes's hands. The chest in the vault stood open, but Holmes noticed a hidden panel in its base. He inserted the locket's key, and the panel clicked open, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a single letter, sealed with a rose-and dagger mark, addressed to the Carvers. Holmes read aloud. "Clara's blood stains your name. The dowry is cursed. Keep it, and die." Thomas's voice shook. "Another threat." "No," Holmes said. "A confession. This is Clara's hand, written before her death. She knew Edward's betrayal and cursed the dowry." He turned to Emily. The Rosiers believe the curse is real. That's why they've waited. A soft laugh echoed from the staircase. A figure in white appeared Sarah, her face pale, a knife in her hand. "You found it, Holmes," she said, "but the curse lives." Holmes stepped forward, unafraid. "Sarah Rosier, I presume your family's done." Sarah's eyes blazed. "Clara was my kin. I've watched this manor for years, waiting. The locket's mine." Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes held up a hand. "No need, Watson. She's alone." He tossed the locket to Sarah, who caught it, startled. "Take it. The dowry's yours to claim legally. The terror ends now." Sarah hesitated, then lowered the knife. "You're letting me go." Holmes's voice was cold. "I'm giving you a choice. Run, and we'll hunt you. Stay, and face the law." Sarah's shoulders sagged. Watson bound her hands, and they led her to the parlor, joining the other Rosiers. Holmes turned to Emily. "The dowry's yours to settle. The curse is just a story, but the truth is yours to face." Chapter 13. Echoes of a Forgotten Vow. The parlor of Ravenswood Manor was heavy with the weight of uncovered truths. The fire's dim glow, casting long shadows across the faces of its occupants. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, the silver locket and its tiny brass key resting beside Clara's final letter. Its Roseanne dagger, sealed stark in the lantern light. Dr. Watson guarded the bound Rosiers: Lydia Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Eliza, James's son, and now Sarah, whose sullen silence filled the room. Emily Carver clutched a necklace with its blood-red stone, her eyes fixed on Sarah, the manor's former kitchen helper turned phantom bride. Thomas sat hunched, his guilt over the family's past etched deep in his face. Outside, the storm had faded to a drizzle, but the air remained thick with unease. Holmes's voice was calm but piercing. "The dowry's found, the locket recovered, and the Rosiers' plot exposed. Yet Clara's letter speaks of a curse, not just land or gold, but a vow. What did she mean?" Sarah's dark eyes met his, her voice steady despite her bound hands. "Clara vowed justice. Edward betrayed her, stole her dowry, and the Carvers hid it. Her curse was her promise. Her kin would never rest until the wrong was righted." Holmes held up the letter. "This is no curse. It's a plea, written in despair. Clara wanted her story known, not vengeance. Your family twisted it into blackmail." He turned to Emily. "Miss Carver, have you found anything else among your mother's things? A vow, a promise, something tied to Clara?" Emily shook her head, her voice small. "Just the necklace and locket. Mother never spoke of vows, but she always said the manor held our family's shame." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Shame, that's the key. The Carvers buried Clara's truth to protect their name." He turned to Thomas. "Your father burned papers, you said. Were there others he didn't destroy?" Thomas rubbed his bandaged arm, his voice low. "Maybe. He kept a box in the attic, locked tight. Said it was private, not even from me." Holmes's lips twitched. "Then we searched the attic. Watson, watch the prisoners. Emily, Thomas, come with me." The attic was a maze of dust and shadows, its air thick with the smell of moldy wood. Crates and trunks loomed under cobwebs, and the single window rattled in the wind. Holmes's lantern swept the space, landing on a small iron box in a corner, its lock engraved with a rose and dagger. Thomas's face paled. "That's Father's." Holmes knelt, using the brass key from the locket. The lock clicked, and the box opened, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were written in a woman's hand, not Clara's, but older, dated a generation later. The top letter read, "To my children, keep the vow. Clara's blood binds us. Protect the manor, but never open the past." Emily's voice trembled. "Who wrote this?" Holmes scanned the signature. "Mary Carver, your grandmother. She knew Clara's story and swore to guard it." He read further, his voice low. "She mentions a vow made to Clara's brother, James Rosier, to keep the dowry hidden until the families reconciled. The Carvers broke that vow, keeping the land for themselves." Thomas's head dropped. "That's why the Rosiers hate us. We betrayed them twice, first Clara, then the vow." Holmes nodded, pocketing the letters. The Rosiers turned a broken promise into a century-long grudge. But there's more. He lifted a small cloth pouch from the box, revealing a silver ring with a red stone, matching the necklace. Another relic, Clara's, I presume. Watson's voice called from downstairs. Holmes, trouble. They rushed to the parlor, finding Watson wrestling with Blackwood, who'd slipped his ropes. The other Rosiers were shouting, trying to break free. Watson pinned Blackwood, his revolver pressed to his back. He tried to run. Watson growled. Holmes's eyes flicked to the prisoners. This spitted Blackwood. The dowries found. The vow exposed. What's left to fight for? Blackwood's scar twisted as he sneered. You think it's over? The manor's cursed. You'll see. Holmes ignored him, turning to the letters. The vow explains the Rosiers' obsession, but not their timing. Something triggered this now. He glanced at Emily. Miss Carver, any recent changes? Visitors, letters, anything odd before the threats began? Emily thought, then gasped. A lawyer came last month, from London, said he was checking old land titles for a client. Thomas sent him away. Holmes's eyes gleamed. A lawyer, likely working for the Rosiers, stirring the pot. Describe him. Thin, gray hair, with a limp, Emily said. He left papers, but Thomas burned them. Thomas nodded. They were about the manor's deeds. I thought it was a scam. Holmes's face hardened. No scam, a probe. The Rosiers were testing you, preparing their move. He turned to Sarah. This lawyer, who was he to you? Sarah's lips pressed tight, but Margaret spoke, her voice cold. Our cousin, William Rosier. He found the old deeds in London, proving our claim. We sent him to scare Thomas. Holmes nodded. And when he failed, you turned to terror. He held up the ring. This was Clara's, wasn't it? A symbol of her vow, left to haunt the Carvers. Margaret's eyes flickered. It was hers. We used it to remind them. A sudden crash came from the hall. Watson raised his revolver, and Holmes moved to the door, lantern in hand. A white figure flickered past the window, a veiled shape, gone in a heartbeat. Emily stifled a scream, and Thomas grabbed her arm. Holmes's voice was calm. Another phantom. They're persistent. He stepped outside, finding a white lace glove on the doorstep, scented with lavender. A note was tucked inside. The vow lives. The manor falls tonight. Watson joined him, his face grim. How many are there, Holmes? Holmes pocketed the glove. One more, at least. William Rosier, the lawyer. He's the final player, orchestrating from the shadows. He turned to Emily. Lock the manor. No one leaves. Tonight, we set a trap. Holmes placed the ring on the parlor table, visible through the window, and doused the lights. They hid in the shadows, waiting. At midnight, a figure in white crept inside, reaching for the ring. Holmes sprang, tackling them. The veil fell, revealing an older man with gray hair and a limp William Rosier. You're late, Holmes said, pinning him. Your family's in chains. The vow's broken. William struggled, his voice hoarse. Clara's curse is real. You can't stop it. Holmes's eyes burned. Curses are stories. Your greed's real. He tied William's hands, and Watson dragged him to the others. Emily's voice was soft. Is it over, Mr. Holmes? Holmes nodded. The Rosiers are done. The dowry and deeds go to the authorities. The vow's echoes fade tonight. Chapter 14. The clock towers riddled the parlor of Ravenswood Manor was thick with tension. The fire's embers casting a faint glow over the bound Rosiers. Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Eliza, James's son, Sarah, and now William, who collective silence was a storm of suppressed rage. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table. The silver ring, with its red stone, and Clara's final letter, beside the lavender-scented glove. All pieces of the Rosier vendetta. Dr. Watson kept his revolver, ready, his eyes scanning the prisoners. Emily Carver clutched her mother's necklace, its blood-red stone catching the light, while Thomas sat, his face heavy with the weight of his family's shame. The drizzle outside had stopped, but the manor's walls seemed to hum with secrets, yet untold. Holmes's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. The dowries found. the vow exposed, and the rosiers caught. Yet Clara's curse lingers not in ghosts, but in questions. William, you're the last piece. What's left to uncover? William, the gray-haired lawyer with a limp, smirked, despite his bound hands. You're thorough, Holmes, but you're blind. The manor holds one more secret. Clara's curse isn't just land or gold, it's truth. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Truth, or another rosier trick. Your family's played enough games with lace and knives. William's gaze flickered to the ring. That ring's not just Clara's. It's a key to the clock tower. Find it, and you'll see. Watson frowned, his revolver steady. Clock tower. There's no clock tower in the manor. Emily's voice was soft. There is. It's in the north wing, boarded up. Grandfather said it was dangerous, falling apart. We never go there. Holmes's lips twitched. Dangerous places hide the best secrets. Lead us, Miss Carver. Leaving Watson to guard the prisoners, Holmes, Emily, and Thomas crossed the manor to the north wing, a drafty maze of sagging beams and peeling paint. The clock tower door was heavy wood, nailed shut, but faint scratches around the edges suggested recent use. Holmes pried the boards loose, revealing a spiral staircase climbing into darkness. The air smelled of rust and old stone, and a distant tick echoed like a clock still running. Holmes lit his lantern, his voice low. Stay close. Our foe's been here. The staircase creaked under their weight, leading to a small room at the tower's top. A massive clock face loomed, its hands frozen at midnight, the gears rusted but intact. Below it stood a stone pedestal, etched with a Roseanne dagger symbol. A small slot, shaped like the ring's red stone, gleamed in the center. Holmes fitted the ring into the slot, twisting gently. A soft click sounded, and the pedestal shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a leather pouch containing a single documental will, written in Clara's hand, dated the day of her death. It named her brother, James Rosier, as heir to her dowry, not Edward or the Carvers. Emily's voice trembled. Clara wanted the Rosiers to have it. Holmes nodded, reading the will. She did. The Carvers stole it, hid it, and built their wealth on lies. This is what the Rosiers sought, not just land, but proof. He turned to Thomas. Your family buried this to save face. Why? Thomas's shoulders slumped. Father never said outright, but he hinted at shame, murder, betrayal. I thought it was just stories. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Stories built on truth. This will changes everything. He pocketed it, but a faint creak came from the staircase. He doused the lantern, pulling Emily and Thomas behind the clock. Footsteps slow, deliberate climbed the stairs. A figure in white appeared, veiled, holding a small knife. The lantern's faint glow caught the edge of a rose pendant at their neck. Holmes sprang, grabbing their wrist. The veil fell, revealing not a Rosier, but Mrs. Gale's face, her eyes wild. Mrs. Gale, Emily gasped. Holmes held her firm. You're no prisoner. You slipped your ropes, didn't you? The lavender scent was yours all along. Mrs. Gale's voice was low, trembling. I'm a Rosier by marriage. My husband was Clara's kin. I stayed to watch the Carvers, to find the will. It's all right. Holmes's grip tightened. Your right stopped at blackmail and blades. Why the clock tower? Mrs. Gale's eyes flicked to the pedestal. The will was rumored here. William told me. I had to be sure. Holmes tied her hands, his face grim. You're the last phantom. The game's done. He turned to Emily. The will proves the Rosiers' claim, but their methods terror lies condemn them. They returned to the parlor, where Watson had resecured the prisoners. Holmes showed him the will. Clara's final wish. The Rosiers were right about the theft, but wrong in their vengeance. Watson's brow furrowed. What now, Holmes? The dowry, the Willets, a legal mess. Holmes nodded. The authorities will sort it. The Carvers owe the Rosiers, but not through blood. He turned to Emily. Miss Carver, the manor's yours to decide. Keep it, or settle with the Rosiers legally. Emily's voice was steady. I want the truth out. No more secrets. A sudden thud came from the hall. Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes moved first. finding a white lace scarf on the floor, scented with lavender, and a note. The clock stops, but the curse lives. Holmes's lips curled. A final taunt. Someone's still free. He scanned the prisoners, noting Blackwood's faint smirk. Or someone's lying. Watson, check their ropes. We've missed something. Watson tightened Blackwood's bonds, but found no clues. Holmes paced, his mind racing. The riddle is solved, but the manor's walls still whisper. Tomorrow, we search every inch. Chapter 15. Shadows on the moors. The dawn broke cold and gray over Ravenswood Manor. The fog rolling thick across the moors, cloaking the estate in a ghostly shroud. Sherlock Holmes stood in the parlor, the white lace scarf and its taunting note. The clock stops, but the curse lives gripped in his hand. Dr. Watson checked the ropes binding the rosier prisoners lit. Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Eliza, James's son, Sarah, William. And now Mrs. Gale, whose collective silence was broken only by Blackwood's faint smirk. Emily Carver held Clara's will, its brittle pages a testament to the Rosier's claim, while Thomas sat, his face etched with shame over his family's buried sins. The manor's air was heavy, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Holmes's voice sliced through the quiet. The clock tower's riddle is solved, the will found, but our foe leaves fresh tokens. This scarf, scented with lavender, came from outside the manor. Someone's still moving, beyond our grasp. He turned to Blackwood. Your smirk betrays you. Who's left out there? Blackwood's scar twitched, but he stayed silent. Holmes's eyes narrowed. No matter, silence speaks as loud as words. He turned to Emily. Miss Carver, the moors any old structures, ruins, or hiding spots near the manor? Emily nodded, her voice soft. There's a shepherd's hut, half a mile out. It's old, falling apart. The village kids say it's haunted. Clara's ghost, they claim. Holmes's lips curled. Haunted or not, it's a perfect hideout. Watson, bring your revolver. Emily, stay with Thomas and guard the prisoners. We're hunting shadows. The moors were a sea of mist, the ground spongy under Holmes and Watson's boots. The air smelled of peat and rain, and the distant cry of a curlew echoed like a warning. Holmes carried the scarf, his lantern dimmed to avoid notice. Watson gripped his revolver, his eyes scanning the fog. This feels like a trap, Holmes, he muttered. Traps are only dangerous if you step blindly, Holmes said. His gaze fixed on faint tracks in the mud, small, hurried, like a woman's. These lead to the hut. Our phantoms careless. The shepherd's hut was a crumbling stone shell, its roof sagging, ivy choking the walls. A faint light flickered inside, barely visible through a cracked window. Holmes signaled silence, creeping closer. He peered through the window, seeing a figure in a dark cloak bent over a table, sorting papers. A white lace veil hung on a hook, and a lavender bottle sat nearby. Holmes whispered, "Not a ghost, a planner." He pushed the door open, his voice sharp. "Good morning. Your game's over." The figure spun, revealing a middle-aged woman with sharp cheekbones and gray eyes. She clutched a knife, but Holmes's steady gaze stopped her. "Drop it," he said. "You're the last Rosier, I presume." The woman's voice was cold. "Anne Rosier, Clara's great-niece. You've meddled enough, Holmes." Watson raised his revolver, dropped the knife. "Miss Rosier." Anne hesitated, then let the knife fall. Holmes stepped forward, noting the paper's maps of the manor, lists of Carver debts, and a sketch of the "You've been busy," he said, "orchestrating from the moors while your kin played phantom inside." Anne's eyes flashed. "The Carvers stole our birthright. Clara's will proves it. We deserved the manor." Holmes picked up the veil. "By terrorizing Emily, stabbing Thomas. Your family's claim was just, but your methods are vile." He pocketed the papers. "Why the moors? Why not join the others?" Anne smirked. "I'm no fool. If they failed, I'd finish it. The hut's been our base for years, watching, waiting." Holmes scanned the hut, finding a small chest under the table. He opened it, revealing more lace tokens, a Roseanne dagger pendant, and a letter addressed to an heir, written in William's hand. The will's in the closet. If we fall, you take the manor. Holmes held up the letter. William's insurance. You are the failsafe. Anne's silence was answer enough. Holmes tied her hands, his face grim. Watson, take her to the manor. The Rosier's net is closing. They marched Anne back through the fog, her head high despite her bonds. At the manor, Emily gasped at the sight. Another one. How many are there? Holmes's voice was steady. This is the last. Anne was the shadow, directing the others. He turned to Thomas. Carver, your family's debts drew the Rosier like wolves. Any other secrets you've kept? Thomas shook his head, his voice hoarse. No, the will, the dowry, that's all. I swear. Holmes's eyes flicked to the prisoners, noting Margaret's clenched jaw. You disagree, Miss Rosier. Margaret's voice was low. The manor's cursed. You've found the will, but Clara's blood still stains it. You'll see. Holmes ignored her, turning to the maps from the hut. One showed a path from the moors to a hidden gate near the manor's west wall. This gate, he said. We've missed it. Watson, check it. Emily, Thomas, stay here. Watson found the gate, half hidden by ivy, its lock freshly oiled. Fresh footprints led to the moors, but the fog hid any trace. He returned, shaking his head. Someone's been through, but they're gone. Holmes's face hardened, a loose thread. The Rosiers are caught, but their allies may linger. He held up Clara's will. This goes to the authorities. The dowry's fate is legal now, not a curse. A sudden gust rattled the windows, and a white shape flickered outside a veiled figure, gone in an instant. Emily stifled a scream, and Watson rushed to the door, finding only a lavender-scented lace ribbon on the doorstep, with a note. The shadows watch. Holmes picked it up, his eyes burning. A final taunt. Someone's still out there, but they're alone now. We'll find them. Chapter 16. The Hidden Passage. The fog clung to Ravenswood Manor like a shroud, its damp fingers seeping through the cracks of the old stone walls. Inside the parlor, the air was thick with distrust, the fire's faint glow barely warming the room. Sherlock Holmes held the lavender-scented lace ribbon and its note. The shadows watched his sharp eyes, scanning the words for hidden meaning. Dr. Watson stood by the door, revolver in hand, watching the bound, Rosier's Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Eliza, James's son, Sarah, William, Mrs. Gale, and now Anne, whose silence was a mix of defeat and defiance. Emily Carver gripped Clara's will, her knuckles white, while Thomas sat, his face buried in his hands, the weight of his family's sins crushing him. Holmes's voice was low but firm. The Rosiers are caught, the dowry found, and the will exposed. Yet this note suggests a final player, someone still slipping through our net. He turned to Anne. Miss Rosier, your maps showed a hidden gate. What else have you concealed? Anne's gray eyes were cold. You've found everything. Holmes, the gate, the hut, the will. There's nothing left. Holmes's lips twitched. Liars always leave crumbs. The lavender scent, the fresh footprints at the gate, someone's close. He held up the ribbon. This was left tonight, after you were caught. Who's your ally? Anne stayed silent, but Blackwood's faint chuckle broke the quiet. You're chasing ghosts. Holmes, the manor's alive with them. Holmes's gaze snapped to him. Not ghosts, people, and people leave traces. He turned to Emily. Miss Carver, the manor's tunnels, we've found several, but the west wing's been quiet. Any old passages there? Emily frowned, thinking. Grandfather mentioned a servant's passage in the west wing, behind the old dining hall. It's boarded up, forgotten. He said it led to the cellars. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Forgotten passages are perfect hiding spots. Watson, with me. Emily, Thomas, guard the prisoners. If anyone moves, shout. The west wing was a maze of shadows, its air heavy with dust and decay. The dining hall's walls were lined with faded tapestries, their threads unraveling. Holmes tapped the panels behind a moth-eaten curtain, finding a hollow spot. He pressed hard, and a section of wall creaked open, revealing a narrow passage. The air inside was stale, but a faint lavender scent lingered. and fresh scuff marks marred the stone floor. Watson gripped his revolver. "They've been here, Holmes, recently." Holmes nodded, his lantern casting jagged shadows. "Stay sharp. Our phantom's close." He followed the passage, its walls rough and damp. It sloped downward, twisting toward the cellars, but a side tunnel branched off, leading upward. Holmes paused, noting a white lace thread caught on a nail. "Clever," he muttered, pocketing it there, guiding us. The side tunnel climbed to a small door, half hidden by cobwebs. Holmes pushed it open, revealing a cramped room tucked under the manor's roof. A single candle burned on a table, its wax dripping onto a map of the manor, marked with red ink. A lavender bottle and a pile of lace scraps sat beside a small notebook, its pages filled with notes in a tight, unfamiliar hand. The carvers weakened. "The passage hides us. The final strike comes at midnight." Watson's voice was low. Another. Rosier Holmes scanned the room, finding a cloak with a Roseanne dagger clasp. Not a Rosier, an opportunist, using their plot. He opened the notebook's last page, finding a name scrawled in haste. Jonathan Vale. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Vale. Not a Rosier, but tied to them. Likely a hired hand, or a local with a grudge. He pocketed the notebook and doused a candle. Back to the parlor. "We need answers." They returned to find Emily pale, Thomas tense, and the prisoners unchanged. Holmes held up the notebook. "Jonathan Vale. Who is he?" Margaret's eyes flickered, but she stayed silent. Sarah, however, flinched, her voice soft. "Vale's no Rosier. He's a village man, a smuggler. We paid him to watch the manor, run messages." Holmes's lips curled. "And to play phantom, I wager. Where is he?" Sarah shook her head. "He works alone, uses the moors, the tunnels. He's slippery." Holmes turned to Watson. The gate's footprints were a man's, heavier than Sarah's. "Vale's our shadow." He glanced at Emily. "Miss Carver, any village talk about Vale?" Emily nodded, her voice shaky. "He's trouble. Drinks at the Black Raven Inn. Brags about old manor secrets. Folks avoid him." Holmes's face hardened. "Then we'll find him. Watson, check the cellars again. I'll take the west wing's outer wall. Emily, Thomas, lock the parlor door." Holmes slipped outside, the fog swallowing the manor's outline. He traced the west wing's wall, finding a loose stone near the hidden gate. Behind it was a small cassia knife, a lavender-soaked cloth, and a note. "Midnight, the carver's fall." The handwriting matched the notebooks. Holmes pocketed the items, his mind racing. Vale's planning a final move. He returned to the parlor, where Watson reported no sign in the cellars. Holmes showed the note. "Midnight's close. Vale's coming, and he's armed." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver. "What's his plan?" Holmes's eyes burned. "To finish the Rosier's work scare. The carver's out, claim the dowry. He's no believer in curses, just gold." He turned to Emily. "Lock every door. Watson, guard the hall. I'll wait in the passage." As midnight neared, Holmes hid in the west wing passage, the lavender cloth in his pocket. The manor was silent, but a faint creak echoed from the outer wall. A man's figure slipped through the hidden door, tall, lean, with a scarred hand, clutching a knife. Jonathan Vale. Holmes stepped out, his voice sharp. "Evening, Vale. Your phantom days are done." Vale lunged, but Holmes dodged, grabbing his arm. The knife clattered to the floor. Watson burst in, revolver raised, and Vale froze. "You're mad," Vale spat. "The manor's mine." Holmes tied his hands, his face grim. "The manor's no one's. The dowry goes to the law." He searched Vale, finding a Roseanne dagger pendant stolen, likely from a Rosier. "You're their errant boy, nothing more." They dragged Vale to the parlor, joining the prisoners. Emily's voice was steady. "Is this the end, Mr. Holmes?" Holmes nodded. "Vale's the last. The curse is a lie, and the shadows are caught." He held up Clara's will. "The truth sets you free, Miss Carver." Chapter 17. A Dance of Deceptions. The parlor of Ravenswood Manor was a prison of flickering shadows. the fire's faint glow casting eerie shapes across the walls. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, the lavender-soaked cloth and Jonathan Vail's note, midnight. The carver's fall clutched in his hand. Dr. Watson guarded the bound prisoners, Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Eliza, James's son, Sarah, William, Mrs. Gale, and now Jonathan Vail, whose sullen glares mixed with the tension of defeat. Emily Carver held Clara's will, her face pale but resolute, while Thomas sat, his eyes hollow with the weight of his family's buried crimes. The fog outside pressed against the windows, as if the manor itself was holding its breath. Holmes's voice cut through the silence. The rosiers are caught, Vail's unmasked, and the dowries secured. Yet this note suggests a deeper game. He held up the cloth, its lavender scent sharp. Vail, you're no mastermind. Who's pulling your strings? Vail, his scarred hand twitching in its ropes, sneered. No one. I saw a chance gold land. The rosiers paid me to scare the Carvers. I played along. Holmes's eyes narrowed. You're a hired blade, not a planner. This note's handwriting doesn't match yours. Someone else wrote it. He turned to Margaret. Your family's fond of deceptions. Who's left? Margaret's lips curled, but she stayed silent. Holmes scanned the prisoners, noting Eliza's fidgeting hands. Miss Eliza, you're nervous. Care to share? Eliza's eyes darted away. I've told you everything. The will, the dowry, that's all we wanted. Holmes's lips twitched. Not quite. The manor's tunnels and gates suggest a larger plot. Someone's been feeding you information. Someone inside. He turned to Emily. Miss Carver, any visitors before the lawyer? Someone who knew the manor's secrets. Emily frowned, thinking. There was a peddler, weeks ago, old, with a limp. He sold trinkets. Asked about the manor's history. I thought he was harmless. Holmes's gaze sharpened. Describe him. Gray beard, patched coat, one eye clouded. Emily said. He stayed a night in the village, then left. Holmes nodded. A spy, likely. Not a rosier, but their eyes. He turned to Watson. The village in Hale might know this peddler. We'll go at dawn. For now, we search the manor again. The West Wing's passage hid Vail, but there's more. Watson's brow furrowed. More tunnels. We've found half a dozen. Holmes's voice was grim. Old houses like this have layers. The peddler knew something. He turned to Thomas. Carver, any family stories about hidden rooms? Places even you avoided? Thomas rubbed his face, his voice low. The ballroom. Father said it was cursed locked. Since Clara's day I never went near it. Holmes's eyes gleamed. A ballroom, sealed for a century. Perfect for secrets. Leaders to ballroom was in the manor's heart, its double doors boarded shut. Holmes pried them open, revealing a vast room with a dusty chandelier and cracked mirrors. The air was heavy, smelling of wax and decay. Faint footprints, small, recent, crossed the floor, leading to a tapestry on the far wall. Holmes pulled it aside, exposing a hidden door, its lock etched with a rose and dagger. He picked the lock, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. The lavender scent was strong, and a white lace ribbon lay on the threshold. With a note, the dance continues. The truth waits below. Watson's grip tightened on his revolver. Another trap, Holmes. A challenge, Holmes said, his lantern casting shadows. Stay close. They followed the passage, its walls damp and tight. It ended at a small chamber, its stone floor marked with fresh scuff marks. A wooden box sat in the center, its lid carved with roses. Inside was a single letter, its handwriting old but clear. Clara's dance ended here. The Carvers betrayed her vow. The dowry's price is blood. Emily's voice trembled. Clara died here. Holmes nodded, examining the box. Likely, this was her last stand. He found a hidden compartment, revealing a small silver dagger, its handle etched with a rose. Her weapon, or her killer's. Watson's eyes widened. Edwards, possibly, Holmes said. The Rosiers believed the Carvers covered a murder. This dagger's proof. He pocketed it, but a soft creak echoed from the passage. He doused the lantern, pulling Emily and Thomas into the shadows. Footsteps approached, light cautious. A figure in a patched coat appeared, holding a dim lantern. The peddler, gray beard, clouded eye, limp. Holmes sprang, pinning him. "Your dance is over," he said. The man struggled, his voice raspy. "I'm just a messenger. The Rosiers paid me." Holmes's grip tightened. "Your name's not important. Who sent you here?" "The peddlers," I darted. "A woman in London didn't give her name. Said to watch the manor, leave notes." Holmes tied his hands. "A woman, not a Rosier, then." Someone knew. He searched the peddler, finding a Roseanne dagger pendant and a crumpled map of the manor's tunnels. "You've been busy." They dragged the peddler to the parlor, where Watson secured him with the others. Holmes held up the dagger. "Clara's, or Edward's, the Rosiers used it to fuel their curse." He turned to Emily. "Miss Carver, the manor's secrets are nearly spent. But this woman in London, she's the final thread." Emily's voice was steady. "What do we do?" Holmes's face hardened. "We go to the village tomorrow. Hale at the inn knows more than he said. For now, lock the manor tight. The dance of deceptions ends soon." Chapter 18. The Innkeeper's Tale. The morning fog draped Ravenswood Manor in a heavy veil, muffling the moor's eerie silence. Inside the parlor, the air was thick with suspicion, the fire's embers barely alive. Sherlock Holmes stood by the window, the silver dagger from the ballroom's hidden chamber glinting in his hand, its rose-etched handle a stark reminder of Clara's fate. Dr. Watson guarded the bound prisoners: Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Eliza, James's son, Sarah, William, Mrs. Gale, Jonathan Vale, and the peddler whose sullen faces hid a mix of fear and defiance. Emily Carver clutched the will, her resolve firm despite the manor's oppressive weight, while Thomas sat, his eyes distant, haunted by his family's betrayal. The note from the peddler's cache. "The dance continues. The truth waits below," lay on the table, its words a lingering challenge. Holmes's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. "The ballroom's dagger confirms Clara's murder, and the peddler's map points to a London orchestrator woman, he claims. But the village holds answers." He turned to the peddler, whose clouded eye darted nervously. "You stayed at the Black Raven Inn. What did Hale know?" The peddler's voice rasped. "Hale talks to everyone. He heard me speak of the manor, ask questions, said the Rosiers were trouble, always watching." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Hale's no bystander. Watson, we're going to the inn. Emily, Thomas, lock the parlor. If anyone moves, call out." The village was a cluster of stone cottages, their chimneys trailing thin smoke into the fog. The Black Raven Inn's sin creaked in the breeze, its dark wood weathered. Inside, the common room was warm but quiet, smelling of ale and bread. Hale, the burly innkeeper with a red beard, wiped a glass, his eyes wary as Holmes and Watson entered. "Mr. Holmes," Hale said, his voice cautious. "Trouble at the manor." Holmes leaned on the bar, his gaze steady. "Trouble's here, Hale. You've heard too much about the Rosiers, the peddler, and the Carvers. Who's the woman in London?" Hale's hand froze, but he forced a smile. "London? I'm a village man, sir. Don't know city folk." Holmes's lips twitched. "You knew the peddler's business. You asked about the manor. Don't play the fool." He slid the peddler's note across the bar. "This mentions a woman pulling strings. You've heard her name." Hale's eyes flicked to the note, then away. "Village gossip, nothing more. Folks talk about the phantom bride, the curse. I listen, that's all." Watson's voice was firm, his revolver visible at his hip. "Listening's dangerous, Hale. The Rosiers terrorized the Carvers. You're hiding something." Hale sighed, setting the glass down. "All right. Last month, a woman stayed here one night. No name, dark hair, city accent, wore a rose pin. Asked about the manor, the Carvers' debts. Paid me to keep quiet." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "A rose pin. Rosier, or their agent. What else?" Hale hesitated, then leaned closer. "She met someone in the back room, a man, not local, thin, with a scar on his neck. They talked about tunnels, a final strike. I didn't hear more. Holmes nodded, filing the details. This man seen him since? No, Hale said. But the woman left a letter, said to hold it for Vale. I gave it to him when he came. Holmes's voice was low. Where's the letter now? Hale shrugged. Vale took it. Burned it, probably. Holmes's face hardened. You've been too helpful to the wrong people, Hallie. If you see this woman, or the scarred man, send word to the manor. He slid a coin across the bar and turned to Watson. Back to Ravenswood. The scarred man's our missing link. The manor loomed through the fog, its windows dark. Inside, Emily and Thomas stood guard, the prisoners unchanged. Holmes showed Emily the peddler's map, a woman in London, a scarred man, and tunnels. The Rosiers had help, and it's close. Emily's voice trembled. Another tunnel. We've found so many. Holmes nodded. The manor's a warrant. Hale's story points to the cellars again. He turned to Vale. You burned the letter. What did it say? Vale's sneer faltered. Nothing. Orders to watch the manor. Leave. Lace. The woman paid well. Holmes's eyes flicked to Margaret. This woman, another Rosier. Margaret's silence was heavy, but Sarah spoke, her voice soft. Not family. A hired hand, like Vale. She called herself Rose. No last name. Holmes's lips curled. Rose, fitting. He turned to Watson. The cellars, we've missed something. The cellars were cold and damp, their stone walls slick with moisture. Holmes's lantern swept the shadows, pausing at a stack of barrels near the vault's grate. He shifted them, revealing a faint crack in the wall. He pressed it, and a hidden door creaked open, exhaling a gust of lavender-scented air. Fresh footprints marked the dirt floor, leading to a small chamber. Inside was a table with a map, a lavender bottle, and a white lace veil. A letter lay open, its handwriting sharp. Rose, the scarred man waits. Strike at dusk, the manor falls. A Roseanne dagger seal marked the page. Watson's voice was tight. They're still planning, Holmes. Holmes pocketed the letter. Not for long. Dusk is hours away. He scanned the chamber, finding a small silver box under the table. Inside was a locket not Emily's, but older, with a rose clasp. It held a faded note. Clara's vow binds us. The scarred man knows. Holmes's eyes burned. The scarred man. He's the final phantom. He turned to Watson. Back to the parlor. We set a trap. They returned, locking the cellar door. Holmes placed the locket on the parlor table, visible through the window, and dimmed the lights. We wait, he said. Emily and Thomas hid with Watson, while Holmes stood in the shadows. At dusk, a figure slipped through the hidden gaita man, thin, with a scar on his neck. He entered the parlor, reaching for the locket. Holmes sprang, pinning him. Your dance is done, he said. The man struggled, his voice hoarse. I'm just a hired man. Rose paid me. Holmes tied his hands. Your name, Carter. The man spat. Rose said the manor's hers. Chapter 19. The Phantom's final masked. The parlor of Ravenswood Manor was a crucible of secrets, the candlelight casting jagged shadows across the faces of its captives. Sherlock Holmes stood over Carter, the scarred man, his wrists bound tightly, his hoarse defiance fading under Holmes's piercing gaze. Dr. Watson guarded the door, revolver in hand, watching the Rosier prisoners Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Elisa, James's son, Sarah, William, Mrs. Gale, Jonathan Vale, and the peddler joined now by Carter, their collective silence heavy with defeat. Emily Carver clutched Clara's will, her eyes steady despite the manor's oppressive air, while Thomas sat, his guilt a visible weight. The locket from the cellar chamber, its rose clasp glinting, lay on the table beside the letter naming Rose, the unseen orchestrator. Outside, the fog thickened, muffling the moor's eerie quiet. Holmes's voice was sharp, slicing through the tension. Carter, you're a hired blade, not a mastermind. Rose sent you for the locket, but she's no Rosier. Who is she, and where is she hiding? Carter's scar twitched, his voice low. I don't know her face. Met her in London, a tavern, in Whitechapel. Dark hair, rose pin, voice like steel. Paid me to scare the carvers. Watch the tunnels, said the Manors, hers by right. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Hers by right, not Clara's kin, then a pretender. He held up the lockets. Note, Clara's vow binds us. The scarred man knows. This points to you, Carter. What vow? Carter shook his head. No vow. Just orders leave lace. Stir fear. Rose said the rosiers were her tools. Nothing more. Watson's brow furrowed, his revolver steady. Tools. She used the rosier's curse for her own gain. Holmes nodded, pacing. Rose is a shadow, weaving the rosier's grudge into her own scheme. The Manor's land, its dowry, she wants it all. He turned to Emily. Miss Carver, any family, enemies beyond the rosiers, someone with a claim to Ravenswood. Emily frowned, her voice soft. No one. The Manor's been ours for generations. But Mother once mentioned a cousin, estranged, who left for London. She never spoke of her again. Holmes's lips twitched. A cousin, a thread worth pulling. He turned to Margaret. Your family's been played. Rose used your curse, your symbols, any London contacts. Margaret's eyes flashed, but she stayed silent. Eliza, however, spoke, her voice low. A woman came to us last year, in London, called herself Rose Langley, claimed she was Edward's kin, Clara's husband, said she'd help us claim the dowry. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Langley, Edward's bloodline, not Clara's. Rose is his descendant, seeking the manor for herself. He held up the letter. This confirms it. She's no phantom, just a thief in lace. Thomas's voice was hoarse. Edward's kin. Why now? Holmes turned to him. Your debts, Carver. The manor's weak, ripe for the taking. Rose saw her chance. He scanned the prisoners. Any of you met Rose Langley, face to face? Sarah nodded, her voice trembling. Once, in the village, she stayed at the inn, gave me the lavender oil, said it was Clara's scent, to keep the curse alive. Holmes's face hardened. The lavender was her mark, not Clara's. Where's she now? Sarah shook her head. She left weeks ago, said she'd watch from afar. Holmes pocketed the locket. Afar, but not gone. The fog hides her, but not for long. He turned to Watson. The manor's tunnels we've missed one. Rose knows them better than the Rosiers. Check the north wing again, near the clock tower. Watson hesitated. Holmes. It's a maze down there. You sure? Holmes's voice was grim. Sure as death. Emily, Thomas, lock the parlor. I'll search with Watson. The north wing was a labyrinth of creaking floors and damp walls, the clock tower's shadow looming. Holmes led Watson to the cellars below, where the air grew colder, thick with mold. Near the clock tower's foundation, Holmes found a loose stone in the wall, marked with a faint rose scratch. He pressed it, and a hidden door groaned open, exhaling a gust of lavender-scented air. Watson gripped his revolver. She's been here. Holmes nodded, his lantern revealing a narrow tunnel. Fresh footprints, small, deliberate, marked dirt. The tunnel twisted upward, ending at a small chamber under the clock tower. A table held a white lace veil, a Roseanne dagger pendant, and a letter, unsealed. In sharp handwriting, the carvers are broken. The manor's mine. Burn it if you must. Holmes's eyes burned. Rose plans to end this violently. He searched the chamber, finding a small silver box. Inside was a photograph, old but clear, of a woman with dark hair and a rose pen, labeled Rose Langley, 1875. Beside it was a recent note. Meet me at the moor's edge, midnight. Watson's voice was tight. She's close. Holmes, tonight. Holmes nodded. Tonight, we set a trap. He pocketed the photograph and note, leading Watson back to the parlor. He showed Emily the findings. Rose Langley, Edward's kin, wants the manor burned. She's meeting someone at midnight. Emily's voice trembled. Burn the manor. Why? Holmes's face was grim. To erase the carver's claim and take the land. The will threatens Hershey, needs it gone. He turned to Watson. Guard the prisoners. Emily, Thomas, stay here. I'll meet Rose on the moors. At midnight, Holmes slipped into the fog, the note in his pocket. The moors were a sea of mist, the air cold and sharp. He reached the edge, where a lone figure stood, a woman, dark-haired, with a rose pin glinting at her throat. She held a lantern, her face sharp and cold. "Rose Langley," Holmes called, stepping forward. "Your phantom's unmasked." Rose spun, her hand reaching for a pistol, but Holmes was faster, grabbing her wrist. "The manor's not yours," he said. "The will proves it." Rose's eyes blazed. "The carver stole it. Edward was cheated, and I'm his heir." Holmes's grip tightened. "Edward murdered Clara. You're no heir, just a schemer." He tied her hands as Watson arrived, revolver raised. "The Rosiers were your puppets," Holmes said. "Now, they're in chains." Rose struggled, her voice low. "The curse is real. You'll see." Holmes's lips curled. "Curses are lies. The law will judge you." They dragged her to the parlor, joining the prisoners. Emily's voice was steady. "Is it truly over, Mr. Holmes?" Holmes nodded, holding up the will. "Rose is the last. The dowry's yours to settle, Miss Carver. The phantom's mask is off." Chapter 20. The Curse Unraveled. The parlor of Ravenswood Manor was a silent battlefield, its air heavy with the finality of unmasked truths. The fire had died to embers, casting a dim glow over the bound prisoners: Lydia, Blackwood, Harrow, Margaret, Eliza, James's son, Sarah, William, Mrs. Gale, Jonathan Vale, the peddler, Carter, and now Rose Langley, whose defeated faces reflected the collapse of their century-long vendetta. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, Clara's will and the Roseanne dagger, locket in hand. Their weight more than mere paper and silver. Dr. Watson leaned against the door, revolver holstered but ready, his eyes scanning the captives. Emily Carver held her mother's necklace, its blood-red stone a quiet anchor. While Thomas sat, his head bowed, the Carver's shame laid bare. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the moor's stark expanse, as if the manor itself exhaled its secrets. Holmes's voice was steady, cutting through the stillness. Rose Langley, Edward's heir, wove the Rosier's grudge into her own greed, using lace, fear, and fire to claim Ravenswood. The will proves Clara's dowry was stolen, but the curse was a liar story, twisted by vengeance. He turned to Rose, whose dark eyes burned with defiance. "Your plot's done. What's left to say?" Rose's lips curled, her voice low. "You've won, Holmes, but the manor's tainted. Clara's blood won't wash out. The Carvers will never rest." Holmes's gaze was cold. "Bloodstains fade. Your family's terror ends here." He held up the will. "This goes to the authorities, along with the dowry. The law will settle what vengeance couldn't." Emily's voice trembled but held firm. "What happens to the manor, Mr. Holmes? Can we stay?" Holmes turned to her, his expression softening. "That's your choice, Miss Carver. The will strengthens the Rosiers' claim, but their crimes weaken it. A court will decide the land's fate. You and Thomas are free of the curse, only guilt remains." Thomas looked up, his voice hoarse. "Guilt's enough. I hid the truth. Let Emily suffer. What can I do?" Holmes's eyes flicked to him. "Face it. Tell the village, the courts, the truth about Clara. Secrets breed curses." He turned to Watson. "We'll escort the prisoners to the village at dawn. The local constable can hold them until London's men arrive." Watson nodded, but his brow furrowed. "Holmes, that last note, the shadows watch. Are we sure Rose was alone?" Holmes's lips twitched. "A fair question. Rose used the Rosier's veil, Carter, the peddler, but her letter mentioned a final strike at dusk." He scanned the prisoners, pausing on Blackwood's faint smirk. "You're amused, Blackwood. Why?" Blackwood's scar glinted in the light. "You're thorough, Holmes, but the manor's old. It keeps secrets, even from you." Holmes's face hardened. "Then we'll find them." He turned to Emily. "Miss Carver, one last search. The manor's heart, the old library. We've overlooked it." The library was a cavern of dust and leather, its shelves sagging under ancient books. The air was thick, smelling of mildew and wax. Holmes's lantern swept the room, pausing on a portrait above the fireplace, a woman in a white gown. Her face Clara's, a Roseanne dagger pendant at her throat. Below, a faint crack ran through the hearthstone. Holmes knelt, tapping the stone. Hollow. He pried it up, revealing a small iron box, its lock etched with a rose. The locket's key fit perfectly, clicking open to reveal a single page, written in Clara's hand. My death was no accident. Edward struck me. The carvers hid it. My vow is truth, let my kin know. Emily gasped. Clara's confession. Holmes nodded, his voice low. Her final act, hidden here. The Rosiers never found it, but Rose suspected. He pocketed the page, scanning the room. A faint lavender scent lingered, and a white lace thread was caught on a bookshelf's edge. Watson's hand went to his revolver. She's been here. Holmes, Rose. Holmes followed the thread, finding a loose panel behind the shelf. It opened to a narrow crawl space, barely wide enough for a person. Inside was a small bundle of lavender-soaked cloth, a rose pin, and a note in Rose's sharp handwriting. If I fall, the truth burns with me. Holmes's eyes burned. Rose planned to destroy the manor if she failed. This crawl space connects to the tunnels. She moved freely. He turned to Watson. Check the prisoners. Rose may have left a final trap. Back in the parlor, Watson found Rose's ropes, slightly loosened. Though she hadn't escaped, her smirk was faint. You're relentless, Holmes. Holmes leaned close. And you're predictable. Where's the trap? Rose's silence was broken by a faint creak from above. Holmes's head snapped up. The attic. Watson, with me. Emily, Thomas, stay here. The attic was a maze of crates and cobwebs, its air thick with dust. Holmes's lantern caught a glint, a small metal canister tucked behind a beam, its fuse unlit but ready, smelling faintly of oil. A lavender-scented lace ribbon was tied to it, with a note. The manna falls at dawn. Watson's voice was tight. A bomb. Holmes. Holmes disarmed the fuse, his hands steady. Rose's last act. She meant to burn the evidence. The carvers. He pocketed the canister, his face grim. The shadows are gone now. They returned to the parlor, where Emily's eyes widened at the canister. She'd destroy everything. Holmes nodded. Greed blinds. Rose used the Rosier's curse to mask her own. He turned to the prisoners. Your phantom's dead. The law awaits. At dawn, Holmes and Watson escorted the prisoners to the village, where the constable took charge. The fog had lifted, the moors stark and quiet. Emily stood at the manor's gate, Thomas beside her, the will in her hands. Thank you, Mr. Holmes, she said. The curse is gone. Holmes's voice was soft. No curse, Miss Carver. Only truth. Use it well. As they left Ravenswood behind, Watson glanced back. Think it's truly over, Holmes. Holmes's eyes gleamed. For now, but old houses keep their whispers. Chapter 21. The last whisper. The autumn wind swept across the moors, rattling Ravenswood Manor's ancient shutters as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples. Inside the parlor, Emily Carver stood by the fireplace. Clara's will and her mother's necklace with its blood-red stone resting on the mantel. The room felt lighter now. The oppressive weight of secrets lifted since Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson had escorted Rose Langley and the Rosier clan to London's authorities a week ago. Thomas paced near the window, his face less haunted but still tense, as if the manor's walls held one final secret. A letter from Holmes, confirming the prisoner's custody, lay open on the table, its words a quiet reassurance. Emily turned to Thomas, her voice steady. The lawyer's coming tomorrow. Thomas. The will's strong, but the Rosiers' claim might drag on. We need to decide stay or settle with them. Thomas stopped, rubbing his bandaged arm, the scar from the Rosier's knife a faint ache. Stay, he said. We owe Clara's truth to the village, to ourselves. No more hiding. A soft knock interrupted them. Mrs. Hale, the innkeeper's wife, stood at the door, her face pale. Miss Carver, I'm sorry to bother you, but something's happened. A boy found this in the moors. She held out a white lace ribbon, faintly scented with lavender, tied around a small, sealed envelope. Emily's heart skipped, her fingers trembling as she took it. "Another one," she whispered, opening the envelope. Inside was a note in sharp, unfamiliar handwriting. "The manor's truth is not complete. Seek the East Tower. Clara's whisper waits." Thomas's eyes widened. "The East Tower. It's been locked since Father's Day. Dangerous," he said. Emily's resolve hardened. "We can't ignore it, Holmes," said Old House's whisper. "This might be the last." She turned to Mrs. Hale. "Thank you. Tell no one, please." Mrs. Hale nodded, hurrying away. Emily clutched the note, her mind racing. "Thomas, we need to check the tower. Tonight." The East Tower was a forgotten relic, its spiral staircase hidden behind a rusted door in the manor's farthest wing. The air was cold, smelling of damp, stone, and decay. Emily carried a lantern, its light flickering on the walls, while Thomas held a crowbar, his steps cautious. The staircase creaked, leading to a small, round room at the tower's top. A single window, cracked and frosted, let in slivers of moonlight. Dust coated the floor, but fresh footprints more, deliberate, crossed to a stone wall etched with a faint Roseanne dagger symbol. Emily's voice was low. "Someone's been here." Thomas tapped the wall, his crowbar ready. "Hollow," he said, echoing Holmes's method. He pressed a rose etching, and a soft click sounded. A panel slid open, revealing a small niche. Inside was a wooden box, its lid carved with roses, and a white lace veil, fresh and lavender-scented dot. Emily opened the box, her breath catching. It held a single journal, its leather cover worn but intact, and a silver brooch shaped like a rose, its petals sharp. The journal's first page bore Clara's handwriting. "My final words, hidden from Edward's greed. The carvers know my fate, but one betrayed us all. Seek the traitor's mark." Thomas's face paled. "A traitor? Not just Edward." Emily nodded, turning the pages. The entries detailed Clara's fear, Edward's cruelty, and a shadowy figure, a carver cousin Robert, who aided Edward's theft and murder. The last entry read, "Robert's mark is the rose brooch. He wears it in shame. The manor hides his guilt." Emily held up the brooch, its silver glinting. This was Robert's. The carvers covered for him, too. A faint creak came from the staircase. Emily doused the lantern, pulling Thomas behind the wall. Footsteps low, soft climbed the tower. A figure appeared, cloaked, holding a dim candle. The light caught a face hold Meg, the village weaver. Her milky eyes sharp despite her blindness. Emily gasped, stepping out. "Meg, you left a note." Meg's voice was low, raspy. "I did, child. I'm no rosier, but Clara's kin by distant blood. My mother served here, knew Robert's sin. I've watched the manor, waiting for truth." Thomas's voice shook. "Why now? The rosiers are gone." Meg's lips curled. "Not gone. Their claim lives in court. Clara's journal names Robert proof. The carver stole more than land. I left the lace to nudge you, Emily. You're strong enough to end it." Emily clutched the journal, her voice firm. "We will. The courts will see this. No more curses." Meg nodded, her candle flickering. "Good. The manor's clean now." Clara's whispers done. She turned, descending the stairs, her steps fading into the night. Emily and Thomas returned to the parlor, the journal and brooch on the table. Emily's eyes burned with purpose. "We'll send this to Holmes, to the lawyer. The carver's guilt is ours to face." Thomas touched her shoulder, his voice soft. "We'll face it together." As dawn broke, the manor stood quieter, its shadows thinner. Emily wrote to Holmes, enclosing Clara's journal. Her words simple, the last whispers found. "Ravenswood will heal.